Master Lu spoils me every night, I can't escape. In a deal, she was handed over by her beloved eldest brother to Lu Qingzhou, the second son of the Lu family. It was rumored that Lu Qingzhou was a gangster who only knew how to spend money on wine and women. She thought she could keep everything, but she had to submit to that dangerous man and fell deeper and deeper into danger. She refused and wanted to escape, and said to someone fiercely, "Mr. Lu, I want to divorce you." The person smiled evilly, stretched out his hand and took her into his arms. "My dear wife, you can't escape in this life." Chapter 1, Master Lu, your wife has run away. My world was pitch dark until you arrived, bringing with you the light. Lu Qingzhou. In the dim room, a man lay lazily on the couch, his long legs casually draped over the edge. His grey casual attire made him look even more relaxed, exuding an air of nonchalance. Suddenly, the phone on the table rang, breaking the silence. Lu Qingzhou opened his eyes with displeasure, grabbed the phone, and answered. "What is it?" "Master Lu, Madam is running away from the wedding." "What are your instructions?" His subordinate's voice came from the other end of the line. "Running away from the wedding." The man's dark eyes gleamed with a sharp, dangerous light, and his expression darkened, like a layer of frost had formed on his face. There was a brief pause, and the voice on the other end continued, "She's running away with another man." A cold smirk tugged at the corner of Lu Qingzhou's mouth, his gaze filled with intense killing intent, sending a chill down anyone's spine. "Stop them all. I'll be there immediately." Lu Qingzhou hung up the phone, his legs slamming onto the floor as he stood up. He patted his clothes and stretched his stiff limbs. This woman dared to so boldly run away with another man? Didn't the Tang family tell her the price for running away from a wedding? On the airport road, a BMW sped at full throttle. The driver was a handsome, youthful man, with black ear studs and messy bangs swaying in the breeze, exuding the vigor of a young man. His face looked somewhat distressed, his brows furrowed as he tried to comfort the woman struggling in the backseat. "Huan, please, stop struggling, you're going to hurt yourself." "Ling Feng, stop it. Let us go back." Jiu Nianhuan's tone remained calm, despite her hands being bound. "No, we can't go back. I will never let you marry that playboy, Lu Qingzhou." The mention of Lu Qingzhou's name filled Tang Lingfeng's handsome face with fury. "Ling Feng, we can't be selfish. We can't just leave Big Brother behind." "Selfish? Is he not selfish? To become president, he wants to use you to please others." Tang Lingfeng's anger was growing. "He didn't use me, it was my choice," Jiu Nianhuan replied softly. "What? Are you crazy? You willingly want to marry that playboy?" Tang Lingfeng stared at her, disbelief written all over his face. Jiu Nianhuan nodded. Tang Lingfeng's anger flared, and he said harshly, "I don't understand what Big Brother is thinking. Does he really have to become president? Does he really have to?" Jiu Nianhuan didn't know. She only knew that Big Brother had told her, "If you marry Lu Qingzhou, Big Brother can take the position of president of the Anher Group, a position that was crucial for him." For Big Brother, she was willing to marry a stranger, even if he was a man rumored to live a life of debauchery. But her heart ached. Big Brother, who had always cared for her, was now using her as a pawn in his dealings to secure the president's seat. How could she not be upset? But she couldn't say it, and she couldn't blame Big Brother. She believed he must have his reasons. Suddenly, a bright light flashed ahead. "Ling Feng, be careful, there's a car ahead," Jiu Nianhuan exclaimed. She saw several black cars parked up ahead. Half an hour later, the blindfolds and tape covering Jiu Nianhuan's mouth were removed. She blinked a few times, trying to adjust to the surroundings. It appeared to be an abandoned factory, and for men dressed in black, their backs turned to them, stood nearby, faces obscured. Chapter 2, Selling My Sister for Glory. "Are you from the same street? You dare to rob me? Do you know who I am?" Tang Lingfeng yelled at the men in black, thinking he was being robbed by some clueless thugs. The men in black shrugged indifferently, not taking him seriously at all. "Are you new to this business? Let me warn you, I am the young master of the Tang family in Jiancheng. If you lay a finger on me, you'll regret it." Tang Lingfeng continued shouting at them. "Money, huh? The Tang family has plenty of it. Let my brother write you a check when we get back. You can fill in any amount you want." In Jiancheng, the Tang family was a well-known and respected family. The title, Young Master of the Tang family, should have carried some weight. However, these men seemed unfazed by it. Isn't this just about selling your sister for glory? Don't yell so loud. A lazy, arrogant voice came from the door. The man walked in steadily, his hands casually in his pockets. His high nose and sharp features made his face even more defined, and his rebellious eyes lazily swept over Tang Lingfeng. What did you say? Say it again. Tang Lingfeng was clearly provoked by the man's disdainful tone. Lu Qingzhou raised his eyebrows, a cold smile curling at the corner of his mouth as he walked over, locking eyes with Tang Lingfeng. I said your brother is someone who relies on his sister to get ahead. Do you have a problem with that? Although Lu Qingzhou's voice was low and slow, it carried an inexplicable sense of oppression, as if he exuded an innate aura of authority. Tang Lingfeng, who had been shouting non-stop, suddenly fell silent, stunned by the aura Lu Qingzhou carried. HMPH, you're talking nonsense. My brother isn't like that. Tang Lingfeng froze for a moment, then quickly regained his arrogance. In an instant, and so fast that Tang Lingfeng didn't even have time to react, Lu Qingzhou pressed his hand against the wall. A knife, gleaming coldly, followed, aiming straight for Tang Lingfeng's fingers. The knife didn't land directly on his fingers, perhaps to just intimidate him, but it still grazed the flesh near his fingers. Blood gushed out immediately. The bizarrely red blood ran down his finger, leaving a trail on the white wall, a sight that was both chilling and unsettling. R. Tang Lingfeng let out a scream, slipping down the wall and collapsing to the floor, fainting. He had a severe fear of blood, especially his own. Jiyu Nianhuan, who was beside him, was also terribly frightened. She curled her fingers in fear, her body trembling slightly. Lu Qingzhou then turned his gaze towards Jiyu Nianhuan, his deep peach blossom eyes narrowing as if he could see right through her. It was the first time Jiyu Nianhuan had seen such a powerful man. He wore nothing but casual clothes, yet his presence gave off the aura of a born king. His eyes were lazy, and he carried an air of calm confidence. She tried to stay calm, took a few deep breaths, and finally spoke in a tone that was overly flattering. Sir, please, have mercy and don't hold it against him. After all, he is Tang Feng's younger brother. Please spare us, and don't make things difficult. She thought mentioning her older brother, Tang Feng, might make this man soften, but instead, Lu Qingzhou's handsome face showed no sign of change. Instead, he looked at her with a trace of interest, a meaningful smile on his lips. Jiyu Nianhuan, how about we play a game? It's simple. Just close your eyes and tell me where I am. If you guess right, you win. What do you think? Just like that. Jiyu Nianhuan couldn't believe it, looking at him with suspicious eyes. Just like that. If you guess right, you can leave. But if you guess wrong. Lu Qingzhou trailed off, a wicked smile creeping over his face as he stared at her. Chapter 3, If you want to chop, chop my hand. What will happen if I guess wrong? Jiyu Nianhuan asked, her arms instinctively crossing in front of her chest in defense. If you guess wrong, he won't get to keep his hand, came the chilling reply. No. I don't want to play. Jiyu Nianhuan hadn't expected this man to be so bloody ruthless. This man must be toying with her. She didn't believe she could win. If she did guess wrong, she couldn't bear the consequences. She couldn't risk Tang Lingfeng's hand as a wager. On the outside, Jiyu Nianhuan maintained an air of quiet dignity, but as she trembled in fear, her vulnerability shone through, adding a softness and beauty to her that was hard to ignore. Lu Qingzhou briefly scanned her body, a faint smirk curling his lips. Slowly and deliberately, he wiped his knife on Tang Lingfeng's clothes, leaving a streak of bright red, before lightly drawing the knife across Tang Feng's fingers. Stop! Before Lu Qingzhou could make his next move, Jiyu Nianhuan urgently called out, now fully realizing just how cruel and bloodthirsty this devil-like man was. If you're going to chop, then chop my hand, Jiyu Nianhuan mustered the courage to say, unable to look up at Lu Qingzhou. Jiyu Nianhuan's social circle was very small, and she spent most of her time at school, so she didn't know Lu Qingzhou personally, though she had heard the gossip about him. Looking at the imposing man before her, she felt a sense of his extraordinary identity. No one else would dare treat her older brother so dismissively. A sense of unease and fear crept over her, wondering if this man really would chop her hand off. Her gaze flickered nervously toward the door, hoping for a miracle. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, and she had no idea how to deal with this dangerous man. Tang Lingfeng was no help, so all she could do was hope her brother would find her in time. Her eyes darted uncertainly, and her fingers curled nervously. A mischievous smile played on Lu Qingzhou's face as he leisurely approached her. What do you want to do? Don't come closer, don't come closer. With each step Lu Qingzhou took, the pressure on Ji Nianhuan grew, as though the very air around her was being squeezed by his presence, suffocating her. She backed up step by step until her back hit the cold wall, unable to retreat any further. Just as Ji Nianhuan was about to look for a way to escape, Lu Qingzhou pressed her firmly against the wall, leaving her motionless. What are you doing? Don't do anything crazy. Ji Nianhuan screamed in fear, desperately trying to break free, struggling like a frightened animal. Unbeknownst to her, her fear only made him more determined to conquer her. Lu Qingzhou's large hand suddenly wrapped around her slender waist, his strength rendering all her struggles useless. She pushed with both hands, trying to increase the distance between her and Lu Qingzhou, but his height and strength were too much for her. Unexpectedly, he lifted her off the ground, and the sudden loss of balance made her heart skip a beat. You're pretty heavy, Lu Qingzhou said teasingly. Ji Nianhuan, who had been trying to avoid eye contact with Lu Qingzhou, quickly turned her head at his comment, locking eyes with his mischievous, almond-shaped eyes. She found herself drawn to the intense allure in his gaze. Apart from her older brother, Tang Feng, Ji Nianhuan had never been so close to any man before. Lu Qingzhou smelled faintly of tobacco, his rich scent enveloping Ji Nianhuan as he held her. She felt the unease growing within her again, and turned her head to avoid the dark, probing gaze that seemed to hold too many secrets she couldn't decipher. Chapter 4: What a disobedient woman. You finally look me in the eye. Are you begging me? Where is your unwillingness to admit defeat just now? Lu Qingzhou's voice was a little hoarse, low and magnetic, and revealed a rebellious aura, as if he didn't care about anything. Ji Nianhuan remained silent and bit her lips tightly. Turn your head around. Lu Qingzhou said in a firm and commanding tone. Ji Nianhuan ignored him and still tilted her head. The next second, their whole body made an intimate contact with the ground with a pop. Hiss. Ji Nianhuan couldn't help but let out a low gasp. She felt like her body was smashed by this violent man. This man really doesn't know how to be gentle with women. Ji Nianhuan had already cursed him several times in her heart. What a disobedient woman. Lu Qingzhou squatted on the ground, looking down at her with pity, but his eyes were filled with hidden anger. When Lu Qingzhou first met Ji Nianhuan, she was as lively and charming as a beautiful butterfly, with an intoxicating smile on her pure face. She seems to have a charming charisma that makes people unconsciously focus their attention on her. Her youthful aura is displayed unreservedly on her young body. However, this beautiful and charming butterfly flew into Tang Feng's arms. In an instant, all the beauty was broken. A hint of coldness flashed across Lu Qingzhou's dark eyes. He leaned over, his charming face close to her ear. Remember, from now on, you can't have physical contact with any man except me. Are you crazy? Ji Nianhuan couldn't help but curse, rubbing his waist which was hurt from the fall. Do I look like I'm kidding you? He stared at her motionlessly, his gaze was too intense. He leaned over, covering her in his shadow, clamped her chin, and forced her to look at him. My elder brother will not let you go. After saying that, Ji Nianhuan turned her head away in intolerance. She really didn't want to see this arrogant man, but was immediately twisted back by Lu Qingzhou. A sneer appeared on Lu Qingzhou's lips, followed by a pair of soft lips pressing over. Ji Nianhuan was angry and hateful, but she could do nothing about him. Finally, Lu Qingzhou kissed her beautiful cheek, his voice calm and peaceful, yet with a hint of ambiguity. Take a kiss back and say hello to Tang Feng. No, don't. As Ji Nianhuan rejected with horror, Lu Qingzhou had already kissed her cheek heavily, leaving a deep red mark. This is the price you pay for running away from your marriage. His tone was gentle, as if he was teaching a disobedient child a lesson. Well, what did you say? I say, Madam Lu, don't let me catch you when you run away next time. Lu Qingzhou laughed wantonly and strode out, leaving Ji Nianhuan dumbfounded. She stood there blankly. What did he call her just now? Madam Lu. Who are you? Ji Nianhuan shouted at him. She had a bad feeling in her heart. Tang Lingfeng has been thrown into the car by my men. Go back and tell Tang Feng that his plan was right this time. It was not until the BMW drove into the Tang family villa that Ji Yunyan finally breathed a sigh of relief, and his tense emotions finally relaxed. Everything that happened just now made her feel a little bit unbelievable, but she knew clearly that everything that happened just now was really happened. She still felt a burning pain on her face, and the deep red mark was visible to the naked eye. Is Miss Nianwan back? Come in quickly. The eldest young master has been waiting in the living room for a long time. The old voice of the butler Zheng Bo sounded, interrupting Ji Yunyan's thoughts. Chapter 5. Do you hate Big Brother? Without giving her time to think, she quickly got out of the car and smiled at Zheng Bo. Zheng Bo, Ling Feng is still inside. He has some minor injuries. Please ask a doctor to come and take a look at him. After saying that, she immediately ran to the living room of the villa. As soon as she entered the living room, she saw her eldest brother Tangafeng sitting on the sofa, smoking a cigarette with a serious expression. Brother, I'm back. Ji Yunyan didn't dare to walk over, but just stood far away at the door. Well, come in, Nian Huan. Tangafeng was as gentle as ever, but his frown showed that he was in a bad mood at the moment. Ji Yunyan walked over cautiously, lowered her head, her long eyelashes drooping, and nervously clutched the corner of her clothes, not daring to look up at him. Tangafeng still saw the deep red mark on her face. His face darkened and his eyes were filled with anger. He tried to control himself. After a while, he said in a normal tone, "Are you all right? If you are tired, go back to your room and have a good rest." The indifferent tone of the elder brother made Ji Yunyan feel even more bitter. As expected, he didn't care about her. Brother, you don't know, Nian and I were kidnapped by that ignorant guy just now. You have to help us get rid of this anger. Tang Lingfeng came in at some point, his face full of indignation. That's enough. I will investigate this matter thoroughly. Seeing that his elder brother was angry, Ji Yunyan immediately stood up and pointed at Tang Lingfeng's wound and said, Lingfeng, your wound seems to be bleeding. Tang Lingfeng looked down and saw that the blood on his fingers seemed to have seeped out a little more. His face turned pale and he said in a terrified voice, Uncle Zheng, help me, I'm bleeding. After Tang Lingfeng left, Ji Yunyan felt the atmosphere was a bit depressing. Brother, I'm going back to my room first. Tangafeng nodded, his face gloomy, hesitant to speak, and finally said nothing. Ji Yunyan dragged her tired body back to the room. The room was decorated by her herself. It was filled with pink objects, making it warm and girlish. As the water from the shower sprayed down, her body was thoroughly washed. Seeing the girl's flawless white and young body in the mirror, Ji Yunyan smiled shyly and quickly covered herself with a bath towel. Fortunately, the man didn't do anything out of line to her. Suddenly, an evil face appeared in her mind, as if his devilish voice was lingering in her ears at this moment. Remember, from now on, you can't have physical contact with any man except me. Ji Yunyan was suddenly frightened. Why is this perverted devil man still haunting her? She can contact whoever she wants, why should he care? Ji Yunyan couldn't help but feel sad when she thought that she would marry the devil man named Lu Qingzhou tomorrow. Even if you don't want to, the person you want to marry is right in front of you, but you have to marry someone else. After sitting for a while, Ji Yunyan stood up and walked towards her eldest brother's room. She wanted to say a few more words to her eldest brother. The door was ajar, as if knowing she would come. There were sounds of running water coming from the bathroom. It should be Tangafeng taking a shower. The room was a bit messy, with many cigarette boxes scattered on the bed. When Ji Yunyan saw this, she felt even more distressed for her elder brother. Nian is here. Tangafeng walked out of the bathroom in pajamas with wet hair, wiping his hair with a towel in his hand. Brother, I'm going to the Lu family tomorrow and I want to come and see you. Nian, you hate Big Brother, right? Tangafeng said bitterly. No, Big Brother must have his own difficulties. Ji Yunyan said softly, his voice getting lower and lower. Do you also think that Big Brother is selling his sister for fame? He gave his sister away to others just to become the CEO. Ji Yunyan shook her head, looking somewhat depressed, and pursed her lips, not knowing what to say. In fact, she didn't really understand why her elder brother had to get the position of president. By the way, you are getting married tomorrow, so let me give you a gift. Tangafeng turned around and took out an exquisite box from the messy bedside table. Chapter 6. She is the bargaining chip. What other gift did Big Brother give me? Jiyu Nianhuan took it with some surprise. It's not an expensive gift, just a token of my appreciation. Open it and take a look. Jiyu Nianhuan carefully untied the bow on top and opened the box. Inside was actually a black lace sexy underwear. She blushed with shame and didn't know what to say. After you get married, you won't be a child anymore. You have to learn how to dress yourself up. Tang Yifeng said. Jiyu Nianhuan forced a smile, closed the box, and her face turned slightly pale. She understood what her eldest brother meant. Did he want her to marry and serve the second young master Lu well? She took the box and ran away without saying thank you to her brother. The box was like a hot potato and was put into the cabinet by Jiyu Nianhuan. She half knelt on the ground, her eyes sore but unable to shed tears, as she prepared to pack the clothes she would take to the Lu family tomorrow. Tang Lingfeng stood at the door at some point, watching Jiyu Nianhuan, who was busy packing her things without even noticing her. Huan, do you really want to marry Lu Qingzhou? Hearing their voice, Jiyu Nianhuan looked up and saw him, his face firm. Yes. I won't let you marry. What right do you have to stop me from marrying you? Are you willing to do anything for your brother? Is it okay to sell yourself out? Yes, I volunteer. Because I'm tired of you bothering me all day long. I want to leave this house. Tang Lingfeng looked a little hurt, but he still endured it, trying not to let his emotions get out of control. I won't bother you anymore, please stay. He said in a pleading tone. Huan. Please, I beg you. That Lu Qingzhou is not a good guy. Others say he is a playboy who spends his days drinking and partying. He is a social scum who does not work properly, is idle, and only knows how to play with sports cars and flirt with beautiful women. If you marry a man like this, you will have a hard time in the future. Seeing that Jiyu Nianhuan was still obstinate, Tang Lingfeng angrily told him all the rumors he had heard. In fact, Jiyu Nianhuan didn't really want to get married, but she had no control over anything. Over the past month, seeing that his elder brother was always frowning and smoking more and more, Jiyu Nianhuan felt very distressed. Ling Feng is here too. Tang Yifeng held a cup of coffee and looked at the two of them with a smile. Brother, you can't be so selfish. You can't push Nianhuan into the fire pit just to get the position of president. Seeing that he couldn't convince Jiyu Nianhuan, Tang Lingfeng directed the conflict towards his brother Tang Yifeng. However, Tang Yifeng looked at him with a sharp and fierce look, and Tang Lingfeng's original arrogance immediately subsided. He bit his lip, feeling a little unwilling. He wanted to say something but didn't dare to say it. Jiyu Nianhuan has this obligation. Tang Yifeng said firmly with an attitude that did not allow any questioning. Obligation. Brother, since we were young, Nianhuan and I have always respected you. Did you adopt Nianhuan just to use her one day? Tang Lingfeng said angrily. Okay, stop talking about Ling Feng. I've told you so many times that I married Lu Qingzhou voluntarily. No one forced me, so don't blame your brother anymore. Jiyu Nianhuan said calmly. But her brother's words just now still hurt her heart. She could give everything for him, but why did he say it so cruelly? Did he really adopt her just to use her as a bargaining chip? Chapter 7, A Night of Love is Worth 1,000 Gold. Jiyu Nianhuan stood up, looked at the two of them politely but distantly, and pointed at the things he was packing, meaning for them to leave. Then we'll go out first. You should pack your things yourself. After saying this, Tang Yifeng pulled the unwilling Tang Lingfeng away. After the two left, facing the suddenly empty room, Jiyu Nianhuan collapsed on the bed tiredly with her eyes closed. That handsome face appeared in front of her from time to time, and she couldn't get rid of it. It was so annoying. The wedding car didn't come to pick up the bride until 7 o'clock the next evening. The groom didn't come, only the driver. No guests invited, no banquets, this is the Lu family's request. From some people's pointing and talking, Jiyu Nianhuan finally understood that half a year ago, the Lu family had a humiliating wedding banquet. Half a year ago, the Lu family held a wedding banquet for the eldest son of the Lu family, Lu Yuming. However, when the wedding banquet was about to begin, instead of the bride, a heavy wooden box arrived. What was in the wooden box was actually a bride in disheveled clothes. Her body was covered with purple kiss marks and her blurred consciousness was conveying a message to the Lu family: she had been raped. Along with the wooden box, there was also an envelope sent to the wedding scene. When the Lu family opened it, they found that it was full of ambiguous photos of Lu Qingzhou, the second young master of the Lu family, and the bride. Each photo deeply hurt the hearts of everyone present. What a fun guy. Ji Nianhuan could understand why the Lu family made such a request. The wedding banquet was a thorn in the Lu family's heart. This just happened to suit Ji Nianhuan's wishes. It wasn't a glorious thing anyway, so of course the fewer people who knew about it, the better. In fact, Ji Nianhuan still doesn't understand. She has neither stunning beauty nor any outstanding abilities, so why would the Lu family fall for her, an adopted daughter of humble status? The wedding room was decorated very festively. Everywhere you looked, there was a bright red color, reflecting the colorful crystal lamps above. It was a different kind of luxury, and the whole room was filled with a charming feeling. It was exactly like the wedding room you had expected. It's a pity that the groom is not the one she wants. Seeing all this, it becomes particularly glaring. She wants to escape from this place immediately, but she knows that she can't. She can't afford the price of running away from the marriage. Ji Nianhuan moved his eyes away and looked at the starry night sky outside the window. He couldn't help but move to the edge of the bed and sit down, quietly looking at this beautiful scenery. As she watched, she was in a trance that she was sitting by the window of her room. She seemed to be able to hear Tang Lingfeng's incessant nagging and Jingbo's earnest exhortations. If she could go back to that time, how wonderful it would be. Those beautiful memories left a mark in her heart forever. Come on, dear child, a night of spring is worth 1,000 gold. An extremely lazy voice came from behind, but it carried a fascinating temptation. Ji Nianhuan felt that his whole body was shaking, as if it was no longer his own. He suddenly stood there unable to move. How could that devil's voice appear here? She subconsciously turned around and looked in the direction of the voice. An evil face was looking at her with a playful smile, just like Satan from hell. The corners of Lu Qingzhou's mouth were slightly raised. His high nose and narrow peach blossom eyes made his face look particularly charming. His dark eyes were staring at Xu Nianhuan motionlessly. You, how come you are here? Ji Nianhuan was trembling, and his voice seemed a little unreal. Because my name is Lu Qingzhou. I am the groom tonight. You are the bride tonight. Lu Qingzhou glanced at Ji Nianhuan's graceful figure wrapped in the red cheongsam with a fiery gaze and showed a satisfied expression. It was really like a long time since I last saw you. Chapter 8: The Price of Cheating Me. Ji Nianhuan felt that she was really unlucky tonight. She didn't want to see him, but he showed up. She was expecting him to hug another woman and whisper in her ear like the male protagonists in those novels. Facts proved that she was wrong. His long legs were almost in front of her. She was forced to step back step by step until her whole body was pressed against the windowsill. She looked at the man who was so close to her with horror. She tried to calm herself, but the remaining consciousness in her mind was plundered by Lu Qingzhou's powerful aura, and her mind was now blank. Lu Qingzhou reached out his hand and stroked Ji Nianhuan's delicate face. His voice was slightly tempting. Be my woman, I will make you happy. He slowly lowered his head. No. Don't. Ji Nianhuan struggled instinctively, trying to push him away. The wonderful wedding night is about to begin, and I will make you unforgettable. The devilish voice sounded again. No matter how ignorant she was, at this moment Ji Nianhuan still realized what was going to happen next. She immediately pressed her hands tightly against his chest, and said in a fearful voice, You don't touch me. I'm on my period, I can't do that. Lu Qingzhou curled the corners of his lips in a sneer, revealing a cold look. You want to use this kind of vulgar routine to fool me? You really take me for a fool. Lu Qingzhou naturally didn't believe her. However, to his surprise, he actually felt thick sponge paper under her body. His hand paused slightly, and he raised his head, his handsome face looking straight at Ji Nianhuan's face that was trying to remain calm. This man is really scary. It's as if he can see through people at a glance. Ji Nianhuan thought while pretending to be calm and looking straight at him. Obviously, Lu Qingzhou's psychological quality was not as weak as hers. He stared at her aggressively for a minute, his dark eyes flashing with cold light, as if he understood something. So, the next second, with a hiss, the sponge paper on Ji Nianhuan's body was torn apart by him. Ji Nianhuan was so frightened that he dared not utter a sound and turned his head away guiltily. What a spoil sport! After seeing what he didn't want to see, Lu Qingzhou snorted and climbed up from Ji Nianhuan. He wasn't so hungry that he would sleep with a woman who was having her period. Lu Qingzhou jumped to the ground, slowly picked up the clothes on the carpet, and began to put them on slowly. Ji Yunyan held her breath and stared at Lu Qingzhou intently, watching him put on his clothes leisurely, and his long legs began to move towards the door. Seeing him open the door, Ji Yunyan couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. However, before he could swallow the breath, it immediately rose to his throat again. Because Lu Qingzhou's footsteps paused, standing still like a sculpture. Ji Yunyan, you are so brave. Do you want to know the price of deceiving me? The sinister and violent voice made Ji Yunyan feel as if he had fallen into an icy cave, and his whole body was cold. I didn't lie to you, it's true, how dare I lie to you? Ji Yunyan said tremblingly, trying to stay calm for fear that he would see through her. Oh? Really? Then could it be that your fingers are also having their period? Lu Qingzhou did not turn around, but his aura still made her feel oppressed. Ji Yunyan lowered his head and looked at the fingers of his left hand. There was a streak of bright red blood on the tip of his index finger which had not yet coagulated. During the struggle just now, the wound seemed to have been torn again, and bright red blood was dripping down. However, Ji Yunyan's nerves were still tense, and he did not notice the pain in his fingers. Ji Yunyan instinctively hid her hand behind her back. She really regretted it now. If she had known earlier, she would have used paint instead. If she didn't feel disgusted, she wouldn't have to cut her finger. Chapter 9 Women, don't fall in love with me. Just as she was regretting, she felt a cold breath coming towards her. Before Ji Yunyan could react, her fingers were already firmly grasped by Lu Qingzhou's big hand. He looked at her injured finger, then looked at her. The blood on her finger seemed to sting him. To be precise, it was a mockery of him. A woman would rather injure herself than consummate the marriage with him. No matter what explanation was given, it would be futile. Ji Yunyan's clear eyes were now filled with hatred. She thought that this violent man would attack her directly. But no, Lu Qingzhou just looked at her coldly. Woman, don't fall in love with me. If you fall in love with me, I will make you live a life worse than death. Lu Qingzhou smiled coldly. This woman successfully angered him. You worry too much. Ji Yunyan smiled faintly, with the corners of his mouth curled up inexplicably. Let's play a game. Within a month, I will make you say in person that you love me. Lu Qingzhou said domineeringly and confidently. Are you trying to force a confession out of me? Ji Yunyan was a little suspicious of this man. He had too many tricks up his sleeve. HMPH, does it take a month to torture someone into confessing? It only takes a minute or even less. Lu Qingzhou snorted coldly. Ji Yunyan was about to say something in retort, but Lu Qingzhou caught her off guard and waved his hand, tearing the thin cheongsam she was wearing. He bit her hard. R. Ji Yunyan screamed in pain. This is the price you pay for deceiving me. Lu Qingzhou's lips curled up into a cruel smile. Very good, you have successfully aroused my desire to conquer you. I will completely conquer you, both physically and mentally. Women, Lu Qingzhou, always have the leftovers, there is nothing I cannot get. The pain spread all over her body, and Ji Yunyan began to tremble in pain. She held back the tears that were about to burst out and clenched her teeth. The next second, Lu Qingzhou picked her up and walked towards the bathroom with steady steps. What are you doing? Ji Yunyan exclaimed in shock at his actions. Lu Qingzhou threw her directly into the bathtub and said, "Wash those dirty things for me." Then he walked away with a gloomy face without even looking at her. Watching Lu Qingzhou walk away with a gloomy face, Ji Yunyan immediately climbed out of the bathtub, ignoring the slippery floor, ran to the bathroom door, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Ji Yunyan leaned against the door. The pain in her body made her gasp for air. Only then did she realize that she had just been thrown into the bathtub by that man and her whole body hit the bathtub. She felt both pain and grievance. But what can we do about it? It's all her own fault. Since it was a deal, why should I keep my body in such a difficult situation? If I obeyed him, I might suffer less. But she was unwilling. She didn't want to become a plaything. With a bang, the bathroom door behind me was slammed shut, and there was a faint sound of it being locked. Lu Qingzhou paused slightly. On the wedding night, not only was he rejected by the bride by self-harming, but he was also guarded against by her like a wolf. This is really ironic. When has he, Lu Qingzhou, ever been insulted like this? Women are all vying to climb into his bed. He licked his lips, which were still stained with her blood. He will definitely tame this woman. Wait and see. Chapter 10, Self-Directed and Self-Acted. Waves kept coming, making a rustling sound. The waves hit the rocks and splashed white waves. This is a ship docked at the seaside. On the bow stood several expressionless men in black. In front of them was a thin and delicate man, who had been forced to the middle of the boat. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of a sharp knife swinging came from inside the boat, which made people feel creepy, especially the delicate man, who was so scared that his face turned pale. He was wearing a black windbreaker, with a hat covering half of his face. He had a sinister smile on his face that made people shiver. The moment he walked out, the man in black immediately made way for him and stood aside respectfully. The delicate man seemed to be frightened by the sharp knife in the hand of the visitor, and he stepped back repeatedly until his back rested against the cold edge of the boat. Are you the male model in the nightclub in the city that never sleeps? He touched the knife, his voice lazy and leisurely. Yes, who are you? The delicate man had a flattering smile on his face. Have you slept with Yi Feiyu? She showed up before the wedding, but she was with you. He stretched out his voice, his face murderous. No, no. The handsome man turned pale, as if he was afraid of being implicated. It has nothing to do with me. Everything was directed and acted by Yi Feiyu himself. I really didn't touch her, really. You mean, Yi Feiyu staged a farce in which she was humiliated in order to refuse the marriage? Although I couldn't see the man's face clearly, the curve between his sexy thin lips proved that he was very angry at the moment. Yes, yes. The exquisite man nodded quickly. I just helped her package it. The so-called packaging should mean being disheveled and covered with purple kiss marks. A hint of coldness flashed in his eyes, and the cold light flashed by so fast that it was hard to see the movement. Along with the exquisite man's shrill ghost howling, a bloody arm fell into the surging sea. This is the price you pay for deceiving my brother. The sinister voice, like a demon from hell, shocked everyone present. In the early morning, warm and gentle sunlight shines through their window, accompanied by the chirping of birds and the fragrance of flowers. The woman who was sleeping soundly on the bed was suddenly awakened. She jumped up from the bed with a start, crossed her legs and stared blankly at the unfamiliar environment around her. It was not the pink room she was familiar with, but bright red everywhere, and there was an inverted character pasted on the headboard. Wait! Is this her wedding room? Realizing this, she looked around in horror, then breathed a sigh of relief. The devil man was not there, and it was still a beautiful morning. When did I change into my pajamas? I don't think I've ever seen this pajamas before. Ji Nianhuan looked down at the clothes she was wearing. The simple pajamas in warm orange were full of girlishness and fit her well. Could it be that devil man? How could he be so kind? A light and elegant fragrance came from outside the window. Ji Nianhuan stood up from the bed. There was a pair of light pink slippers on the ground with 2 unicorns printed on them. She put on her shoes and walked towards the balcony. There are several pots of orchids on the balcony, which are in full bloom at this moment. The faint fragrance comes from the orchids. I didn't expect that this devil man could actually grow flowers. This room has an excellent view. Standing on the balcony and looking down, you can have a clear view of the Lu family. She stretched her body, greedily inhaled the fragrance of the flowers, and glanced down at the garden. A slightly lonely figure caught her attention. Chapter 11. Call him brother-in-law. He was a man sitting in a wheelchair. The sunlight cast a faint halo on him, but it could not conceal the deep sadness on his handsome face. If Ji Nianhuan guessed correctly, that person should be Lu Yuming, the eldest son of the Lu family. As the saying goes, even a hero is tempted by beauty. If you want to defeat a man, give him a woman. Beauty is really a disaster. Lu Qingzhou's gaze fell on the garden, and his voice was filled with hidden anger. Ji Nianhuan was startled and turned around immediately. Lu Qingzhou had come to her side without her knowing when. How come this man walks without making any sound? Xu Nianhuan subconsciously moved away, fearing that Lu Qingzhou would suddenly pounce on him. As if he could see through her thoughts, Lu Qingzhou raised a teasing smile and said, I'm not talking about you. You want to be a beauty who brings disaster, but you're not qualified enough. Ji Nianhuan rolled her eyes. This man, why does he like to guess other people's thoughts so much? Not to mention that she doesn't want to be a beauty who brings disaster. Even if she wants to be, the person who wants to bring disaster is not you, Lu Qingzhou. A slender and strong arm stretched out and embraced Ji Yunyanhuan's slender waist. Ji Yunyanhuan twisted her body and struggled hard. This balcony couldn't cover anything. Wouldn't it be so embarrassing if someone saw it? However, an evil voice came from my ear. Why, you don't want to spend the wedding night tonight? Ji Yunyanhuan's body suddenly froze and she allowed him to hold her. Originally they were going to go back to their parents' home today, and Ji Yunyanhuan had already decided that he would go alone, and he didn't expect Lu Qingzhou to accompany him. Besides, the two of them were just playing around, so why did they have to act like a couple in front of others? Who knows, maybe this man was too much. He insisted on accompanying her and acted like a good husband. Of course you have to accompany me when I go back to my parents' home, right, my dear wife? Otherwise, your elder brother will blame us, the Lu family, for not taking good care of me. That being said, Lu Qingzhou didn't seem to take Tang Yifeng seriously at all. He just wanted to put on a show. Ji Yunyanhuan couldn't do anything about him, and was even forced to wear the couple outfit he bought, with two connected red hearts embroidered on the chest. At this moment, she really felt that this man was extremely childish. The car slowly drove into the Tang family courtyard, and Tang Yifeng was already standing at the door waiting. I have to say that Lu Qingzhou behaved like a gentleman in front of outsiders. After getting out of the car, he took the initiative to open the door for Ji Yunyanhuan and held her hand, as if he was afraid that she would fall. If Ji Yunyanhuan hadn't seen his violent side, she would have been deceived by his gentle appearance. In the eyes of the Tang family, they are a loving couple who are close to each other. If their hand on her waist had not increased the strength, Ji Yunyanhuan would have resisted the urge to push him away, forced a smile, and walked into the Tang family villa surrounded by the Tang family. Tang Lingfeng was leaning on the escalator on the second floor. When he saw Ji Yunyanhuan and Lu Qingzhou being so intimate, his face changed immediately. He ran to Ji Yunyanhuan angrily and said, Ji Yunyanhuan, you are so good. You have been inseparable from her for only one day after getting married. Ji Yunyanhuan looked embarrassed and was about to say something when Tang Yifeng's face darkened. Ling Feng, watch your words. This is your brother-in-law, say hello to him. Lu Qingzhou raised his eyebrows, looking like he was enjoying a good show. I won't call him. He is not my brother-in-law. Tang Lingfeng was obviously angry at his elder brother's words, and turned around and ran away. Chapter 12, Contest at the Dinner Table. It's Tang's fault for not disciplining him properly that he became so unruly. I hope you can bear with me, brother-in-law. Tang Yifeng said, but there was no apology on his face. Lu Qingzhou snorted coldly, brother-in-law, there's no need to be so polite. We are all family. Then let's go eat together. I've asked the kitchen to prepare it. After seeing the prawns on the table, Ji Yunyanhuan naturally took a plate and began to peel the shells, carefully separating the shells from the shrimp meat bit by bit with skillful techniques. After peeling, he dipped them in sauce and placed them neatly on the plate in front of him. Brother, please eat. Ji Yunyanhuan moved the plate in front of Tang Yifeng. Lu Qingzhou's face darkened instantly, his dark eyes flashing coldly. Did this woman treat him as if he didn't exist? Why was she trying to please another man so blatantly? He stood up and picked up the red wine glass on the table. Brother, I toast you for raising such a gentle and virtuous sister. Out of politeness, Tang Yifeng had to put the shrimp in his chopsticks back on the plate, stood up, raised his glass and clinked glasses with Lu Qingzhou. Second Master Lu, you're too polite. Maybe it was because he used too much force, but Lu Qingzhou clinked the glass hard and all the red wine splashed onto the plate of shrimps. Lu Qingzhou smiled slightly and said calmly, I'm sorry, I'm too excited. Time seemed to stop at that moment, and the two men on the table looked at each other knowingly. It's okay. It's just a plate of shrimps. Tang Yifeng took over the conversation with a smile, without any displeasure in his expression. Ji Yunyanhuan glared at Lu Qingzhou, knowing that he did it on purpose. Brother, I'll peel it for you again. Heh, it's just a plate of shrimps, not the position of the president of Anher Group. Lu Qingzhou leaned lazily on the chair, with a mocking and disdainful look on his face, as if he had Tang Yifeng in his grasp. Tang Yifeng's hand holding the wine glass exerted a little force, and his fingertips turned white, but his face remained expressionless. No need, Big Brother's appetite has not been very good recently, so he doesn't eat seafood. After saying this, he smiled soothingly at Ji Yunyanhuan. After hearing this, Ji Yunyanhuan paused and the shrimps he had not finished peeling fell directly onto the plate. Such delicious shrimps cannot be wasted. Lu Qingzhou stretched out his hand and took the plate in front of Ji Yunyan. Well, it tastes good, thank you, my dear wife. Lu Qingzhou looked very satisfied with the meal. Tang Yifeng did not refute anything, but listened quietly. The youthful bravado was already a thing of the past in his life. He did not need to argue with Lu Qingzhou over a few words. Brother, I'm full. I'll go upstairs to get some books for school tomorrow. Ji Yunyan really didn't want to stay and watch Lu Qingzhou's arrogant look. I have already completed the leave of absence procedures for you. You don't have to go to school tomorrow. Tang Yifeng's tone was strong and carried an authority that left no room for questioning. What? Ji Yunyan widened his eyes and stood there blankly, simply unable to believe it. Brother, you are so thoughtful. We are newlyweds, so we should have some fun for a few months. Lu Qingzhou said with a playful look on his face. Ji Yunyan's lips curled up into a bitter smile, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. In the pink room, the girl sat in front of the desk with a book in her hands, as quiet and beautiful as a painting. Lu Qingzhou leaned against the door, quietly looking at Ji Yunyan, who was motionless. Do you want to go to school? Chapter 13. You're really perverted. Ji Yunyan came back to her senses and saw Lu Qingzhou with a smug smile on his face. She glanced at him lightly, pursed her lips and said nothing, but her expression showed that she was not very happy. Seeing that she didn't seem to want to pay attention to him, Lu Qingzhou walked in calmly. Who let you into my room? You're so annoying. For some reason, Lu Qingzhou actually thought that Ji Yunyan was very cute when she was angry, with her cheeks puffed out and her watery eyes wide open, making people want to pounce on her. Lu Qingzhou's eyes darkened, and he took a step forward, pulled Ji Yunyan, who was in front of the desk, and hugged her tightly in his arms. Ignoring Ji Yunyan's struggle, he grabbed the back of her head and gave her a gentle and tender kiss. Ji Yunyan was caught off guard and felt dizzy, and was almost suffocated by the kiss. You are such a pervert. You filthy rascal. After being released, Ji Yunyan finally got a breath. She pointed at Lu Qingzhou's nose with her eyes wide open. Humph, there are even more rogue things I haven't done yet. Sure enough, Lu Qingzhou's deliberately prolonged ending tone made Ji Yunyan feel dangerous. Her face changed slightly, and she hurriedly picked up a few books on the desk and ran downstairs without even looking at them. Lu Qingzhou had a playful smile on his face and squinted his eyes at the petite figure who was fleeing in panic. Ji Yunyan quickened her pace, as if she was afraid of being caught up by Lu Qingzhou. She hurried out the door without even saying hello to her eldest brother. She was really afraid that this man would do something out of line in front of her eldest brother. Nianwan, wait. Tang Yifeng's urgent call made her stop. Ji Yunyan turned around and saw Tang Yifeng holding a basket of cherries, which looked very fresh. Brother knows that you like cherries the most, so I prepared these specially for you. Take them. As he said that, Tang Yifeng stuffed the fruit basket into her hands. Ji Yunyan took the cherry, picked one up and put it in her mouth, looking very happy. It turned out that her elder brother still cared about her. Lu Qingzhou appeared quietly, grabbed her wrist with his slender hand, and pulled her out of the Tang family's gate. Isn't it delicious? Let me have a taste too. Lu Qingzhou snatched the fruit basket from her hand, glanced at the trash can not far away, walked straight over, and threw the fruit basket in. Then he glanced at Tang Yifeng, who was standing at the door with a provocative smile. Ji Yunyan bit her lip and looked at him angrily, but didn't dare to say anything. It's not that he was deliberately picking on this basket of cherries, but the person who sent the cherries made him feel upset, especially the happy look on Ji Yunyan's face when she took the cherries, which made him feel even more upset. We in the Lu family have as much of this fruit as you want. It would be so troublesome to take it back. Lu Qingzhou said nonchalantly. Ji Yunyan said nothing and walked straight towards the car. Along the way, Ji Yunyan deliberately sat far away, not saying a word, looking out the window sullenly. Lu Qingzhou fell silent for a rare moment, driving the car attentively, his dark eyes filled with a hint of melancholy. Wife, I have something to do tonight. I won't be home with you. You have to stay alone in the empty room. Ji Yunyan was secretly delighted in her heart. It was better not to go home, so that she wouldn't have to find a way to deal with him. Ji Yunyan was flipping through the book she got from the Tang family, but a thought popped into her mind. What serious things can I do when I go out at night? She was shocked by her own thoughts. Who cares what he does when he goes out at night? It's none of her business. Chapter 14. Mr. Lu agrees that you can go to school. The night is as cool as water, and the faint moonlight is sprinkled on the ground. This is a remote abandoned factory in the south of the city, which looks dilapidated from a distance. Boss, what are we doing here? The speaker was a gentle man wearing glasses named Cole. Just wait and see. The man smoked a cigarette, blowing out smoke rings lightly, with a lazy look on his face. Not far away, several luxurious cars followed by a van were slowly approaching. Several people got off the van and skillfully opened the factory gate. Then, the people in the cars also got off, wearing suits and ties, looking like successful people. When I pushed open the door of the factory, I was surprised to find that it was decorated magnificently, with a dark passage leading to nowhere. Boss, do you want to follow me in? The man didn't say anything, but stood up. He moved swiftly and quietly towards the factory and walked down the corridor. This is actually a hidden underground casino. The scene was comparable to those in the movies, with a bustling crowd and sexy female dealers dealing cards. It was like an underground casino that had been operating for a long time. The man pretended to lift up his sleeves, revealing a hidden camera that had filmed everything. Then, the man waved his hand and quickly left with his men, disappearing into the darkness. In the early morning, sunlight shines into the room through the window. The sleeping beauty on the bed curled up like a cat, and the sunlight shone on her face with a special softness. As if she felt that she was bound by a force, Ji Nianhuan had to open her eyes to find the source of the restraint. The slender waist was being embraced by a big hand, and the whole person was held in his arms in an ambiguous posture. When she saw the owner of the hand, Ji Nianhuan was startled. When did this man come back? Then she calmed down because she saw that she was dressed neatly and still wearing the thick pajamas she wore last night. The man fell asleep with his eyes closed. He looked gentler and less arrogant than usual. His dark eyes were closed, making him less scary. She carefully moved the hand away, tiptoed out of bed, picked up her shoes, left the room barefoot, and put on her shoes when she was outside the room. The man on the bed suddenly opened his eyes, watched her close the door, and an evil smile appeared on his face. Ji Nianhuan walked down the stairs and was about to go to the kitchen to make some breakfast. Madam, are you awake? A gentle voice came. Ji Nianhuan looked in the direction of the sound and saw a middle-aged woman in an apron busy in the kitchen. Just call me Aunt Shui like Qingzhou does. From now on, I will call you Huan Huan. Huan Huan sounds so nice. Calling you madam is too strange. This Aunt Shui was a bit self-familiar, but she looked very kind. Ji Nianhuan nodded obediently and sniffed. The breakfast made by Aunt Shui smelled so good. By the way, Huan Huan, go wash up quickly. After breakfast, the driver of our family will take you to school. Qingzhou works late at night, so you don't have to wait for him. As he said this, breakfast was already placed on the table. Auntie Shui, what did you say? Can I go to school? Did Mr. Lu agree? Ji Nianhuan was a little surprised. Yes, Qingzhou came back last night and specifically told me to make breakfast early. Aunt Shui smiled kindly. When Ji Nianhuan heard this, a part of her heart began to warm up. Chapter 15. If you take it back, it's mine. At the same time, in the luxurious conference room, several leaders of Anher Group arrived one by one. They were all called by Meng Xiao in the morning. They must have encountered some emergency. On both sides of the chief position sat Meng Xiao's two most capable vice presidents, Tang Yifeng and Meng Xiao's nephew Lin Chuan. Lin Chuan was a cruel and vicious person. Meng Xiao admired this very much. So he had always suppressed Tang Yifeng and was rumored to be the best candidate for the president of Anher Group. Chairman Meng Xiao has not arrived yet. Lin Chuan put his feet on the table, with a smug look on his face, and said to Tang Yifeng across from him, Tang Yifeng, I told you before that you should give your sister to me, how do you think about this? To be honest, my sister has already been taken advantage of by the second young Master Lu. Tang Yifeng said calmly. What did you say? Second young Master Lu. Isn't he just the gangster who just came back from the United States? Lin Chuan looked disdainful. That's right. Tang Yifeng was too lazy to refute Lin Chuan's evaluation of Lu Qingzhou. Tang Yifeng, you are such a coward. Your own sister was taken away by someone else. Isn't she just a gangster? What are you afraid of? I will get her back for you. But. Lin Chuan laughed twice, looking angry, she will be mine after I get her back. Then I'll wait for your good news. Tang Yifeng smiled slightly. This was exactly what he wanted. Meng Xiao walked in with a gloomy face and a newspaper in his hand. With a bang, the newspaper was thrown hard onto the table. What's going on in the news? The news clearly stated, a large casino was discovered locally, the police received a tip-off and are conducting a secret investigation. Uncle, someone must be behind this. Lin Chuan said with a flattering look on his face. Shut up. Now it's my fault. Go check who is so fearless of death. Meng Xiao's face trembled violently with anger. He glared at Lin Chuan hatefully. Yifeng, go and check this matter. Yes. Cousin. The casino is managed by Lin Chuan. If anything goes wrong, shouldn't Lin Chuan be the one to solve it? Ding Wei on the side spoke hurriedly, looking unhappy. Everyone knows that this matter is not easy to resolve. Meng Xiao wants to use Tang Yifeng as a gun. Meng Xiao stared at Ding Wei for a few seconds. She had never spoken in such situations before. Yifeng's abilities are obvious to everyone. I feel relieved to let him handle this matter. Meng Xiao glanced at Tang Yifeng with an approving look. But Ding Wei wanted to say something, but Tang Yifeng gave her a look and she had to give up. At the gate of a university, a dark black Porsche was parked in the distance. The man inside the car was squinting his eyes, looking at the figure running out not far away. However, the next second, the man's face quickly turned gloomy, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Because that figure threw herself directly into a man's arms, smiling as beautifully as a flower. Brother. Ji Nianhuan looked at Tang Yifeng happily. After not seeing him for a few days, he seemed to have lost a lot of weight and had sharper features. As usual, Tang Yifeng opened his arms, embraced her, held her in his arms, and quietly enjoyed the peace of the moment. Brother, why are you here? Ji Nianhuan raised her head from his arms with a sweet smile on her face. What? Don't you want to see me? Tang Yifeng smiled and tapped her nose, looking at her lovingly. No way. Ji Nianhuan pouted with a look of pouting. Suddenly, the smile on Tang Yifeng's face froze, because he saw a man leaning against the Porsche in front of him, staring at the two of them with a cynical smile on his face. Chapter 16. Where do you want to take my wife? Tang Yifeng turned his head, his expression normal. Are you hungry? Let's go have a meal together. Okay, I want to eat the braised prawns from Linjiang Pavilion. Ji Nianhuan said with a smile. As you wish. Just as the two men opened the car door, a cynical voice sounded behind them. Brother-in-law, don't you even say hello to your brother-in-law when you see him? Tang Yifeng's body froze, too stiff to move. Lu Qingzhou stretched out his big hand and pulled Ji Nianhuan into his arms. His strong and powerful body imprisoned her, making her unable to move. Why, where does brother-in-law want to take my precious wife? Anger gathered in his dark eyes, he licked his sexy lips and asked coldly. I heard something happened in the south of the city last night. Lu Qingzhou deliberately raised the end of his voice and said meaningfully. Tang Yifeng's expression changed slightly, and he looked at Lu Qingzhou with a little more inquiry. We just happened to meet. Ji Nianhuan wanted to explain, but was suppressed by Lu Qingzhou and couldn't breathe. Let's go have a meal together. Lu Qingzhou smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. Then I'd rather obey you than be disrespectful. Ji Nianhuan didn't expect Tang Yifeng to agree so readily, and a hint of bitterness rose in her heart. The location was still set at Linjiang Pavilion, because Tang Yifeng knew that he would meet Lin Chuan here. Ji Nianhuan sat in Lu Qingzhou's car, not daring to breathe. Even her breathing was cautious. She didn't dare to look at his gloomy face, this stingy man. When they got into the box, the atmosphere was weird. Ji Nianhuan was forced by Lu Qingzhou to sit next to him, and Tang Yifeng sat opposite them. Lu Qingzhou had just walked out of the box when a drunk man pushed the door open and came in. He sat directly next to Ji Nianhuan and started touching her without saying a word. Lin Chuan. What are you doing? Take your dirty hands away. Ji Nianhuan shouted harshly. The person who came was Lin Chuan, who had been coveting Ji Nianhuan for a long time. My little beauty. I've missed you for a long time. TSK TSK. Such a beautiful flower is actually stuck on Lu Qingzhou's head. As he spoke, his body pressed towards Ji Nianhuan. Get out. Don't touch me, don't touch me. R. Ji Nianwan struggled but couldn't break free. She looked at Tang Feng as if asking for help. There was a burst of hurried footsteps outside the box. Tang Feng heard it and sat still at the table. Ji Nianwan looked at him in despair. She didn't expect that her elder brother would just sit there and do nothing. Let her go. Lu Qingzhou's sharp voice just sounded, and the next second, an unceremonious left hook hit Lin Chuan in the face. Lin Chuan was caught off guard and fell to the ground. Lin Chuan touched the corner of his mouth, which was already bleeding. His eyes widened with anger and his tone became fierce. You are such a jerk, Lu Qingzhou. You dare to hit me, I will make you pay for it. I'm going to hit you. Lu Qingzhou hooked his finger and looked at him provocatively, not taking him seriously at all. Lin Chuan was completely enraged and swung his fist directly at Lu Qingzhou. Lu Qingzhou dodged sideways, grabbed his collar with one hand, and swung his other hand towards his face. As if he was not satisfied, he punched him several more times. Just when Lu Qingzhou was enjoying the fight, he was caught off guard and a knife was pressed against his neck. Lu Qingzhou stopped moving, still looking calm and composed, with a hint of smile on his face. Seeing the situation getting out of control, Tang Feng couldn't help but worry. He was surprised that Lu Qingzhou, a gangster, could be so skilled. When he saw Lin Chuan actually took out a knife, he was also stunned. He hadn't taken the position of CEO yet. If something happened to Lu Qingzhou, it would not be good. Chapter 17, Hot Wife. He was just about to take action to stop him, but Ji Nianwan, who had been silent all the time, suddenly picked up the red wine bottle on the table and smashed it hard on the table. The bright red liquid splashed instantly. She took the broken wine bottle and pressed it against Lin Chuan's neck at an extremely fast speed. Put down the knife. Ji Nianwan shouted sharply. Lu Qingzhou narrowed his eyes and looked at Ji Nianwan with more appreciation and praise. He never thought that his wife would have such a violent side. It was getting more and more interesting. Seeing that Lin Chuan didn't react, Ji Nianwan became ruthless and pressed the broken bottle against his neck, leaving a red mark, and bright red blood flowed down his neck. I told you to put down the knife. Did you hear me? Ji Nianwan shouted again. You little bitch, how dare you threaten me with a broken bottle? It seemed that Lin Chuan had not expected that the usually quiet and gentle Ji Nianwan would be so fierce. For Lin Chuan, who regularly does fitness training, these were just superficial injuries and were not worth mentioning. He turned around abruptly, snatched the broken bottle from Ji Nianwan, and looked at her with fierce eyes. Go to hell, you stinky girl. After saying that, he raised the broken bottle in his hand and smashed it straight towards Ji Nianwan's head. Lu Qingzhou was startled and realized that he was too obsessed. It was too late to pull Ji Nianwan away. The broken bottle was about to hit her head. With a loud bang, Lu Qingzhou stretched out one arm and crossed it over Ji Nianwan's head. The broken bottle hit his hand directly, and the broken pieces of the bottle seemed to pierce into his skin, leaving a bloody mess on his arm. His other arm was not idle either, and he directly hooked Ji Nianwan over and protected him in his arms. Ji Nianwan instinctively buried her head in his arms. Lin Chuan, who was standing by, didn't seem to be ready to stop. He was about to swing the knife in his hand, but Tang Feng slapped him on the neck fiercely. Lin Chuan's eyelids fluttered and his body fell limply. Leave here quickly, Lin Chuan's people will be here soon. Tang Feng reminded them, and Ji Nianwan finally reacted. She blushed and broke free from Lu Qingzhou's arms. When she saw the wound on his arm, her heart still trembled violently. How painful must this bloody wound be? She looked up and saw Lu Qingzhou looking nonchalant, but from his furrowed brows and slightly pale face, it was obvious that he was trying his best to endure the pain. In the dark black Porsche, Tang Feng was driving the car in the driver's seat, and the other two were in the back seat. Lu Qingzhou, are you okay? Let me see. Ji Nianwan asked anxiously, but was afraid of touching his wound, so she could only look over carefully. Something's going on. Lu Qingzhou leaned towards him all of a sudden and rubbed her chest restlessly. Just as Ji Nianwan was about to struggle, Lu Qingzhou hissed and she froze. Don't move. The wound hurts a lot. Lu Qingzhou deliberately grimaced, as if the wound was really painful. Seeing that Ji Nianwan seemed to have acquiesced to his behavior, someone became even more presumptuous, rubbing here and there. Seeing that Lu Qingzhou's arm was still bleeding, Ji Nianwan frowned. She looked around the car and found nothing that could be used for bandaging. She rummaged through her bag and found only a handkerchief that her eldest brother had given her. She liked it very much and always carried it with her. Chapter 18: Her Careful Care. Ji Yunyan gritted her teeth and didn't care about anything else. Looking at the glass shards on his arm, she felt a little distressed. After all, he was not made of iron, and it must be very painful to have these shards pierced into his arm. The handkerchief was very short, so she had to tear it in two and then put it together again, and then carefully bandaged his injured arm, barely stopping the bleeding. Tang Yifeng's face became more and more gloomy. Through the rearview mirror, he saw Ji Yunyan tear open the handkerchief he gave her and bandage Lu Qingzhou's wound carefully. He never thought that the girl he raised would destroy his gift for another man. His heart was aching. Especially, seeing Lu Qingzhou's restless hands wandering on Ji Yunyan's body, Tang Yifeng's face became even gloomier, and his hands holding the steering wheel turned white due to the force. "Brother, can you drive faster?" Ji Yunyan was worried that Lu Qingzhou's wound would get infected, so she couldn't help but urge him. Tang Yifeng didn't answer, but the speed of the car suddenly increased. In the past, Ji Yunyan would always remind him every time he went on the road, "Don't drive too fast." But this time, she was so worried about another man that she completely forgot what she had said before. Lu Qingzhou looked at Tang Yifeng's expression of suppressed anger, then looked at his wife's worried look, and felt so happy in his heart. After sending them to the Lu family safely, Tang Yifeng left before Ji Yunyan could say anything. He felt that if he stayed for a few more minutes, he would not be able to help but rush up and beat Lu Qingzhou up. Ji Yunyan stopped where she was, staring blankly at Tang Yifeng as he left without any reluctance, a faint sadness rising in her heart. Hiss! Lu Qingzhou's low cry of pain brought Ji Yunyan back to her senses, and she quickly helped him in. In fact, this little flesh wound was nothing to him. He just couldn't stand seeing her so distraught because of Tang Yifeng. "Auntie Shui, please bring the medical kit quickly," Ji Yunyan shouted as soon as she entered the door. Aunt Shui brought over the medical kit and saw the wound on Lu Qingzhou's arm. Her face was filled with heartache and worry. "Aunt Shui, I'm fine. You go down first. My wife will help me take care of the wound." Lu Qingzhou gave her a wink. Aunt Shui wanted to say something but stopped herself, but finally went down. Ji Yunyan took the medical kit and put it aside, then prepared what she needed and carefully untied the handkerchief she had just bandaged. The handkerchief had already stuck to the flesh and blood, and she tried several times, but could only remove it little by little. Lu Qingzhou lowered his head and watched her carefully helping him remove the handkerchief. She was so careful, afraid of hurting him. He couldn't help but be intoxicated by such a gentle gesture. When the handkerchief was finally taken away, Ji Yunyan was already sweating profusely. She used tweezers to pick out the broken glass shards bit by bit. During the whole process, Lu Qingzhou didn't say a word, as if he was not dealing with his arm. "Okay." Ji Yunyan tied the bandage and finally breathed a sigh of relief. She didn't even notice that the man's narrow peach blossom eyes were becoming increasingly fiery. In the thick night, the bright starlight shines in, stretching the shadows of the two people diagonally, and the shadows cover each other, inseparable. On such a beautiful night, something should happen. Ji Yunyan was caught off guard and pressed down on the bed by Lu Qingzhou. This extremely unsafe posture made Ji Yunyan feel the danger instantly. Chapter 19: Let's play a game. Mr. Lu, you are still injured and it is not suitable for you to do strenuous exercise." Ji Yunyan tried hard to increase the distance between them, feeling a little flustered. "What? You still don't want to consummate your marriage with me?" Lu Qingzhou's dark eyes were filled with hidden unhappiness. No. As soon as the words came out, Ji Yunyan wanted to bite his tongue. "So you are willing?" Seeing that Lu Qingzhou was about to lean over and over him, Ji Yunyan immediately panicked, looked at him with innocent eyes, and shook his head hastily. "But I really want to consummate my marriage, what should I do?" Lu Qingzhou deliberately prolonged his voice, waiting for Ji Yunyan's answer. Ji Yunyan raised his head with a look of rejection on his face. After seeing that Lu Qingzhou didn't seem to make any moves, he relaxed his guard a little. "How about this, let's play a game, let's just play the simplest one, and the winner can make a request. How do you think?" Seeing Lu Qingzhou licking her sexy lips leisurely, Ji Yunyan instinctively sensed danger. She tightly protected her body with a defensive look on her face. "What tricks are you trying to play?" 3 cards, compare them one by one, best of 3, fair and just. Ji Nianhuan was still wondering whether this game was a trap, and hesitated to respond. If you don't play, then I win. Lu Qingzhou said leisurely. Don't. Can't I just play? Hearing Lu Qingzhou say this, Ji Nianhuan immediately panicked. Playing is better than losing directly. What if God favors her and lets her win? Lu Qingzhou calmly took out a brand new deck of cards from the bedside table, shook it in front of her, opened it, and shuffled the cards several times before handing them to her. Etc. Ji Nianhuan stared at Lu Qingzhou's confident smile and thought to himself, what if he cheats? She snatched the cards, looked through them carefully several times, and after making sure there was no problem with the cards, she shuffled them several times. You have to close your eyes and draw, and let me flip the cards. After thinking about it, Ji Nianhuan put forward the conditions. Lu Qingzhou smiled evilly, closed his eyes obediently, and randomly picked a card from the deck. It was Ji Nianhuan's turn. She prayed silently before drawing a card. Ji Nianhuan first took Lu Qingzhou's card and looked at it. It was a 5, a number that was neither big nor small. When it was her card, she took it out tremblingly, turned it over, and it was a 7. She actually won. I won. I won. Ji Nianhuan is an innocent and lively girl. At this moment, a smile bloomed on her face. Lu Qingzhou looked at it and was actually a little mesmerized. This beautiful butterfly was finally willing to smile for him. However, the next second, Ji Nianhuan stopped laughing and stared at Lu Qingzhou. This man must have deliberately let himself win first so that he could let down his guard. What a sinister guy. Seeing that Ji Nianhuan had restrained her smile, Lu Qingzhou was a little puzzled. Why, you are not happy about winning? If you win, I will let you control me tonight. Lu Qingzhou had an evil look on his face, which made Ji Nianhuan's face turn red instantly. Humph. Ji Nianhuan couldn't help but snorted coldly. How could you let me win? You must be kidding me. Lu Qingzhou raised his eyebrows and said lazily, this is really a false accusation. It's easy to find a pretext. Whether you can win or not depends entirely on luck. How can you blame me? Chapter 20. I think you should change the conditions. Ji Nianhuan pursed her lips and stared at him for a long time, as if she believed him. You really won't cheat. Don't think so badly of me. Lu Qingzhou said with a little grievance. Ji Nianhuan thought, who told you to always find ways to bully me? The second round continued, and this time it was Ji Nianhuan's turn to draw the first card. As usual, she prayed first, then took out a card from the deck as if she had made up her mind. After getting the cards, she took a quick look and found it was at 3. Her heart sank instantly. It was over, unless he drew a 2, and the possibility of that was extremely small. Can I change it? Ji Nianhuan blinked her big watery eyes and looked at Lu Qingzhou pitifully. You can choose to give up this round, but then I'll be the winner. Lu Qingzhou's dark eyes held a playful smile. Ji Nianhuan gritted her teeth and made up her mind. If she chose to give up, she would definitely lose. She would just bet on whether the card in his hand was a 2. Even if it wasn't, at least there was still a third game. Lu Qingzhou smiled and was reluctant to hand over the cards in his hand. He just stared at Ji Nianhuan and laughed, making her scalp numb. Ji Nianhuan stretched out her hand and snatched the card from his hand. When she saw it, she burst into laughter. The card in his hand was actually 2. Yeah. I won. I actually won. Ji Nianhuan stood up happily and jumped up and down without caring about his image. Later, Ji Nianhuan realized, how could this man who could win tens of millions of dollars in an hour lose to her? Lu Qingzhou quietly enjoyed her simple happiness and her beautiful smile that moved people. Lu Qingzhou, you lose. Does what you just said still count? Ji Nianhuan asked cautiously, fearing that he would go back on his word. Of course, I have to accept the defeat. Lu Qingzhou originally thought that Ji Nianhuan would shyly say to him, Mr. Lu, I hope you don't touch me tonight, okay? However, the conditions that Ji Nianhuan proposed next made Lu Qingzhou feel like he was shooting himself in the foot. Ji Nianhuan did have a shy look on her face, but the words she said seemed to indicate she wanted to resolve the issue once and for all. Mr. Lu, I want to live on campus. Ji Nianhuan said softly. What? Living on campus? Lu Qingzhou seemed surprised. He didn't expect Ji Nianhuan to be so quick-witted, to have grasped this opportunity very well, and to have made long-term plans. As he felt that she was smarter and cleverer, Lu Qingzhou couldn't help but feel sad about the way he had tied himself up in knots. He nodded approvingly. Well, good conditions. What, you want to get rid of it once and for all? I think you should change the conditions. Ji Nianhuan secretly glanced at him, and saw Lu Qingzhou's dark eyes narrowed slightly, flashing a dangerous light, looking at her quietly. She felt a hint of danger, pulled the cashmere quilt on the bed to cover her legs, and muttered with a little lack of confidence, "But, you just promised me that the winner can make a request." "Well, that's what I said, but who would have thought that God would favor my precious wife tonight?" Lu Qingzhou covered his chest, looking heartbroken and aggrieved, and said, "Baby is in pain, but baby won't say it." Ji Nianhuan was amused by his silly look and let down her guard. For the first time, she looked at Lu Qingzhou seriously. "What are you looking at? Are you mesmerized by my handsomeness?" Lu Qingzhou touched his face, looking very proud. Chapter 21, meeting his family for the first time. Pfft. Narcissist. I think you're not that bad. Not only is it not that bad, it's actually very good. Lu Qingzhou moved closer to her, almost touching her face, staring at her straight in the eyes. Ji Nianhuan's heart was filled with alarm. She almost forgot that this man wanted to consummate the marriage with her at every turn. She was almost deceived by his appearance. She stepped back subconsciously, and before she knew it, her body had already fallen under the bed, and she was about to fall off the bed. Lu Qingzhou stretched out his arms, hugged her around the waist, and a playful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Pull me up quickly." Ji Nianhuan struggled with his hands, and except for his legs, the upper part of his body was hanging outside the bed. "Are you still living on campus?" Lu Qingzhou said in a teasing tone. No. Ji Nianhuan replied hurriedly, fearing that he would accidentally drop her to the ground. "You're so obedient. I like obedient children." Lu Qingzhou looked at her with satisfaction and pulled her up easily with one effort. Ji Nianhuan sat next to him, breathing a little quickly, with a slight anger in her eyes, and she pursed her lips and said nothing. "My dear wife, are you angry?" "No." She said no, but she was indeed not very happy. She turned around with her back to him and prepared to lie down. She was just about to lie down when she was caught off guard by a pair of hands reaching out from her waist, pulling her forcibly into his arms and holding her in his arms. Ji Nianhuan suddenly cried out in pain. Lu Qingzhou was forced to stop and frowned. "I haven't done anything yet, aren't you calling me too early?" Ji Nianhuan's face turned red, and her tone was a little annoyed. "My leg seems to be bleeding." Lu Qingzhou was stunned for a moment, then immediately leaned over to look at her leg. There was a wound on her fair leg, and blood was oozing out. He raised his head and stared at her sharply. "Ji Nianhuan, are you hurting yourself again?" I didn't do that. It was just that some pieces of wine bottle splashed on my leg during the day. I had already covered it with a band-aid, but it got rubbed off just now." Ji Nianhuan said, a little aggrieved, frowning in pain. Seeing the mist in Ji Nianhuan's eyes, Lu Qingzhou's expression softened and he didn't blame her anymore, but there was still a hint of heartache in his heart. "Wait for me for a while." Lu Qingzhou jumped off the bed, walked out of the room barefoot, and came back a few minutes later with a medical kit in his hand. "Come here, I'll help you with this." Ji Nianhuan was still in a daze. Lu Qingzhou sighed helplessly, bent down and quickly helped her treat the wound. Hearing Ji Nianhuan sobbing, Lu Qingzhou frowned and asked, "Does it really hurt that much?" After all, the wound was not deep, just a shallow one. Ji Nianhuan nodded while sobbing. It didn't really hurt, she just wanted to cry. Looking at Ji Nianhuan who was crying, Lu Qingzhou couldn't help but stretch out his slender fingers and gently wiped away the tears on her face. He said in a praised tone, "I didn't expect our Huan to have such a cool side." What he was referring to was when she put a broken bottle on Lin Chuan's neck today. Suddenly, Ji Nianhuan felt that he seemed to be getting closer and closer, almost sticking to her. She was frightened and quickly moved to the edge of the bed, paying attention for fear that she would fall again. Lu Qingzhou pursed his sexy lips and stared at Ji Nianhuan dimly. "It seems that I can only sleep well tonight." Hearing him say this, Ji Nianhuan felt relieved. At least he was stable tonight. "Go to sleep, my dear wife." He hooked his hand, pulled her into his arms, and lay down holding her. Although this position was also very dangerous, Ji Yunyan understood that he was giving in, and she couldn't say anything. What if he got beastly? It would be even worse. She could only let him hold her in his arms as she slept. After a while, Ji Yunyan heard Lu Qingzhou's subtle and regular breathing, and he seemed to have fallen asleep. She raised her head. After falling asleep, the sharpness on Lu Qingzhou's face was much less, and his whole body had a gentle feeling. Just as Ji Yunyan was about to fall asleep, the bedroom door was slammed heavily, and Aunt Shue's urgent voice rang out outside the door, "Qingzhou, it's bad." The eldest master was sent to the emergency room for alcoholism. Lu Qingzhou, who had been dozing with his eyes closed, suddenly changed his expression. He immediately jumped out of bed, put on his slippers and went to open the door. "Auntie Shue, when did it happen? Which hospital?" "Just now, he should be in the city hospital." "Go over and take a look." Lu Qingzhou said nothing and ran out of the bedroom in his pajamas. Ji Yunyan thought that his arm was still injured, so she took a coat and ran out with him. The dark black Porsche was speeding on the road. Ji Yunyan was sitting in the car and it felt like the car was whizzing by before she could even see the scenery outside the window. She didn't know how many red lights it ran through along the way. Ji Yunyan saw a somewhat different Lu Qingzhou. His dark eyes flashed with cold light, and his face was so cold that it kept people at a distance, making people afraid to approach him. This was the first time Ji Yunyan met Lu Qingzhou's parents. They had not appeared at previous weddings. "Dad, Mom." After seeing the anxious middle-aged couple in front of the emergency room, Lu Qingzhou immediately ran over. Father Lu just glanced at her calmly without saying anything. Instead, he turned around to comfort the emotional mother Lu. "Don't ever call me Mom. I can't bear you calling me Mom. I have been very kind to you over the years. Isn't what you eat, wear and use better than your brother? Your brother finally falls in love with a woman, and you want to snatch her from him. Do you still have a conscience?" Mother Lu choked up and turned her head to look towards the emergency room. "Mom, I'm sorry. It's all my fault." Lu Qingzhou lowered his head and apologized in a low voice. "It's your fault. If you hadn't come back, your brother's wedding wouldn't have been ruined. It's all your fault. You've ruined your brother." Mother Lu became more and more agitated. She pointed at Lu Qingzhou with tears in her eyes. It's no wonder that Lu's mother is so sad. Lu Yuming had a great wedding, but not only did the bride get lost, but the Lu family also lost face. Now he is still lying in the emergency room. But what puzzled Ji Yunyan was why did Mother Lu ask Lu Qingzhou not to call her mom? Even if she was very angry, she shouldn't do that. Aren't they biological mother and son? The relationships in this family are really messy. Mom, don't get excited. I will definitely find Yi Feiyu back. When the name Yi Feiyu was mentioned, hidden anger and murderous intent appeared on Lu Qingzhou's face. Yi Feiyu is the woman who ruined all of Big Brother's expectations. Retrieve it. How can we retrieve it? It won't be complete even if we retrieve it. Thinking of those disgusting photos, Mother Lu couldn't help crying. Mom, don't cry. Nothing happened between her and me. She asked someone to make those photos. Lu Qingzhou stretched out his hand to pat his mother's shoulder, but was slapped away by his father. He stood there somewhat lonely. Ji Yunyan stood there awkwardly, not knowing how to start the conversation. Then, Mother Lu looked at her with a sharp gaze. Who is this woman? Chapter 22, Treat people well in the future. This is my wife, Huan. Come here and say hello to my parents. Ji Yunyan smiled awkwardly without moving. She didn't know how to greet his parents for a moment. After all, she was not a proper daughter-in-law of the Lu family, and she always felt that she was deceiving them. Qingzhou, Mom begs you to find your sister-in-law back. I don't know what's wrong with your brother. He has to die for that woman. Mother Lu breathed a sigh of relief, her expression gloomy, and she became much gentler. Before Lu Qingzhou could answer, the lights in the emergency room went out, the door was pushed open, and the doctor pushed out of bed. Lying on the bed was the pale-faced Lu Yuming. Lu Yuming still looked very weak, but when faced with everyone's concern, he still showed a gentle and humble smile. Ji Yunyan felt that this man must be someone who was deeply in love. She couldn't understand how Lu Qingzhou could have the heart to snatch his woman away. Faced with his parents' reproach to his younger brother, Lu Yiming kept smiling and shaking his head, trying to excuse his younger brother, fearing that his parents would vent their dissatisfaction on his younger brother. Mr. and Mrs. Lu kept giving many instructions, and when the doctor impatiently asked them to give the patient some time to rest, everyone finally left with some concerns. Before leaving, Lu Yiming held Lu Qingzhou's hand, his eyes gentle. "Qingzhou, you must treat the girl well in the future." Jiyu Nianhuan felt warm in her heart and gave Lu Yiming a sincere smile. On their way home, Lu Qingzhou's face was still grim, his fingertips gripping the steering wheel turned white from the force he exerted, and the car was speeding up. "Mr. Lu, are you okay?" Jiyu Nianhuan looked over with some concern and asked cautiously. However, the answer she got was Lu Qingzhou's silence. He stepped on the accelerator as if he didn't hear her. Due to the effect of inertia, even though Jiyu Nianhuan was wearing a seatbelt, he still fell forward and his head hit the windshield, making a crisp sound. Lu Qingzhou slammed on the brakes and the car stopped urgently on the side of the road. "I'm sorry. How are you?" He sounded a little self-blaming. "I'm fine, I just bumped into something." Jiyu Nianhuan rubbed his forehead, which was swollen and had a big bump on it. She really felt that she was always hurt after meeting this man, and she sighed subconsciously. "What's wrong? Does it hurt?" Lu Qingzhou thought she was gasping because of pain. "It's really okay, go back." Jiyu Nianhuan had a vague feeling that Lu Qingzhou was not liked by the family members in the Lu family. She felt a little distressed for no reason, probably because she thought that they were all living under someone else's roof. "Let's go back and continue the bridal chamber." Lu Qingzhou smiled in a rogue manner, with the corners of his mouth raised. The car started and continued driving on the quiet street, this time at a much slower speed. When they arrived at the door of the villa, Lu Qingzhou did not stop the car. After sending her into the villa, he turned around, got into the car, and drove away quickly. It turned out that he just wanted to send her home safely. She was still foolishly worried that this man would do something excessive to her after he got home. As she watched the car go farther and farther away, she felt more and more that she didn't seem to see this man clearly at all in the past 2 days. There were too many mysterious things about him. Jiyu Nianhuan slept very soundly that night. Perhaps it was because she was tired after a night of running around, or maybe it was because there was no dangerous person threatening her innocence. She felt much more at ease. The morning sun shone on her. Jiyu Nianhuan opened her eyes and found the room empty. "Oh no, I'm going to be late for school." She suddenly remembered that she had classes today, so she changed her clothes in a hurry and ran downstairs. What surprised Jiyu Nianhuan was that Lu Qingzhou was sitting at the dining table, looking very comfortable, with his long legs casually folded together, and a glass of milk and a piece of toast in his hands. When did this man come back? He seemed to be in good spirits, except for his bloodshot eyes. After hearing the noise, Lu Qingzhou raised his head slightly and wiped his hands gracefully. "Come here." His voice was a little hoarse and low, and he stared at Jiyu Nianhuan with sharp eyes. Jiyu Nianhuan pursed her lips, walked towards her reluctantly, sat on the chair next to him, and secretly moved the chair back a little. "Want to live on campus?" Lu Qingzhou asked with narrowed eyes. "Of course I do. Very much." Jiyu Nianhuan was roaring in her heart, but she didn't dare to say it out loud. Instead, she carefully observed his expression and found that he was not as scary as he was last night. Then she muttered softly, "I think it's better for students to live on campus." Aunt Shui came over with a fried egg pancake and just heard this. She said righteously, "Huan, you should also consider Qingzhou. If you live in the school dormitory, what will happen to your married life? Couple life? Of course there is no better." Jiyu Nianhuan's face turned red because of what Aunt Shui said. How could Aunt Shui say anything? "You can live on campus, but only for a week." Seeing her aggrieved expression, Lu Qingzhou finally gave in. After all, there was a long time to come, and he was not in a hurry. 1 week is just 1 week. "I'll be back on time." Jiyu Nianhuan nodded obediently. She would delay it as long as possible. At least she wouldn't have to face him for the next week. She was still a little wary of him. What surprised Jiyu Nianhuan was that on the table there was her favorite millet porridge and pumpkin pie, as well as a plate of fresh cherries. She felt that she didn't have to maintain any image, so after the meal, she had eaten almost everything on the table and burped with satisfaction. After a long while, Lu Qingzhou sighed meaningfully, "If I had known earlier, I would have asked Tang Efeng for more dowry. Ji Nianhuan said nothing, just lowered his head and continued eating. A thin and bony middle-aged man came in from outside the door and handed a credit card to Lu Qingzhou. "Second young master, this is what the eldest young master asked me to give you. There is 5 million in the card, and he told you to go to the Lu group to help out when you are free, and also told you to stop messing with Lin Chuan." "Lin Chuan? Did he go to embarrass my brother?" Lu Qingzhou sat up straight and asked in a cold voice. "Yes. He also extorted a lot of money from the young master, saying it was compensation for mental damage. Why is my brother so confused? He just gives money to people when they ask for it. Doesn't he know to ask me instead?" Lu Qingzhou was slightly angry. Lin Chuan said, "If you don't give me money, I will find someone to kill you. The eldest young master is worried about the safety of the second young master." The middle-aged man answered tremblingly. "Heh!" Lu Qingzhou sneered, "Find someone to kill me? I think he is tired of living." Lu Qingzhou's face was covered with gloom, his eyes were cold and chilling. "Second young master, please don't be impulsive. The eldest young master is just afraid that you will go to him again, so he wants to keep things quiet. Go down and tell my brother that I will find a way to get the money back. Our Lu family is not so easy to bully." Ji Nianhuan saw Lu Qingzhou's bad expression, which showed murderous intent. She was so scared that her legs couldn't stop shaking under the table. She tried to reduce her presence as much as possible, got out of the chair, and quickly fled the villa. Ji Nianhuan felt with horror that there was a pair of sharp and cold eyes behind her, which were fixed on her and moved with her. It was very eerie and terrifying. She felt that this man was too scary. Fortunately, she did not marry him for love, otherwise, that woman would not be able to accept her husband staring at her with such cold eyes every day. Moreover, this idle man actually asked his brother to give him living expenses. How shameful! Chapter 23 Yi Feiyu appears. After returning to school, Ji Nianhuan sat next to her best friend Xiao Ningning, who interrogated her for 2 classes and even held her tightly when the get out of class was over, not letting her leave. "Hurry up and tell me, Ji Nianhuan. Do you have a man outside? You haven't come to school for several days." Xiao Ningning crossed her hands in front of her chest, looking like she would not let you go unless you tell me. Cough cough cough. Ji Nianhuan was frightened by Xiao Ningning's questioning. Could it be that she discovered something? "Are you still good sisters? Tell the truth." "My eldest brother was sick these days and I was taking care of him at home," Ji Nianhuan said with a guilty conscience. Xiao Ningning glanced at her and believed what she said. Having known her for such a long time, Xiao Ningning knew that Ji Nianhuan valued her elder brother more than anything else. It was not surprising that she took a few days off to take care of her elder brother. There were some rumors in the school during the days when Ji Nianhuan was not here, saying that she was spotted by a rich second-generation man and married him. Xiao Ningning didn't quite believe this. With big brother Tang Efeng around, he would never let Ji Nianhuan get married. Xiao Ningning never thought that Tang Efeng would actually send Ji Nianhuan away in order to become the president. She accidentally found out about this a long time later, and she scolded Tang Efeng for several days for this. After 2 days of peace and tranquility, Ji Nianhuan did not return to the Tang family or the Lu family. Instead, she pestered Xiao Ningning to play with her for 2 days. She didn't go back to the Lu family because she was afraid of being harassed by Lu Qingzhou. The reason why she didn't go back to the Tang family was because she had some resentment in her heart, especially when her eldest brother said that. Her heart ached and she wanted to avoid her eldest brother. On the morning of the 3rd day, after finishing the boring ideological and political class, Ji Nianhuan wanted to take Xiao Ningning out to eat, but Xiao Ningning looked at her slyly. Whenever Xiao Ningning showed this expression, Ji Nianhuan knew what she was planning in her mind. "What do you want to do?" Ji Nianhuan stared at her suspiciously. "Look, I've been with you for 2 days, and my brother is a little dissatisfied." Xiao Ningning laughed twice, "So I decided to go back and accompany him tonight." "Xiao Ningning, do you want to abandon your sisters?" No, just tonight. Come with me to the pharmacy." After Xiao Ningning finished speaking, she didn't care whether Ji Nianhuan was happy or not, and she pulled her out of the school gate and went straight to the pharmacy. "Boss, this beauty wants a box of TT." Xiao Ningning said loudly while lying on the counter. Before Ji Nianhuan could say anything, the boss had already handed her a box. She was a little embarrassed. The boss looked at her strangely and stuffed it directly into her hands. Ji Union Wan. What are you doing? Tang Lingfeng's roaring voice suddenly sounded behind her. Ji Union Wan immediately put the things in her hand behind her and signaled Xiao Ningning to take them away quickly. However, Xiao Ningning acted as if it was none of her business, which made her so angry that she wanted to hit someone. Ling Feng, why are you here? Ji Union Wan smiled guiltily. Uncle Zheng is sick, and your brother asked you to go back and see him. Tang Lingfeng stretched his neck to see what was hidden behind her, but Ji Union Wan had already thrown the things into her bag. Then go ahead, Huan. By Tilder, Xiao Ningning winked at her and walked away with a smile. Let's go, stop looking. Ji Union Wan quickly pulled Tang Lingfeng out of the pharmacy. Tang Lingfeng was chattering all the way, and Ji Union Wan only replied a few words without much interest. All she could think about was how to deal with the hot potato. If Lingfeng found out and told her brother, it would be embarrassing. She didn't want her brother to know about this. Of course, she was even more afraid of being seen by that bastard Lu Qingzhou. When they arrived at the Tang family's house, before they even entered the living room, Tang Lingfeng had already raised his voice and shouted, "Brother, look who's back." However, when he stepped into the door of the living room, his face immediately stretched into an expression as if he had seen a ghost. Lu Qingzhou sat opposite Tang Lingfeng, crossing his legs, looking relaxed and comfortable, and sipping a cup of tea. Lu Qingzhou, why are you in my house? Tang Lingfeng subconsciously wanted to pull Ji Union Wan behind him, but Lu Qingzhou had already seen her. My wife is here too. It seems that we really have the same thoughts. I just asked my brother if he wanted to pick you up from school. Lu Qingzhou said quietly. Ji Union Wan stopped at the door, not knowing whether to go in or not. Lu Qingzhou stood up from the sofa and walked towards Ji Union Wan leisurely. Noticing that she was a little frightened and stopped where she was, he quickly hooked her waist and pulled her into his arms. Regardless of the presence of the two brothers from the Tang family, he whispered in her ear, "My dear wife, why are you sneaking back to your parents' home? How come she was sneaking around again? She came back openly, okay? She just happened to run into this unlucky man." Ji Union Wan rolled her eyes speechlessly. Now that we've discussed this, I'll take my wife home to have a baby. Lu Qingzhou looked at Tang Lingfeng meaningfully. Tang Lingfeng smiled elegantly, showing no displeasure at all. However, Tang Lingfeng was so angry that he was puffing his beard and glaring. If he had not been frightened by his elder brother's sharp eyes, he would probably rush up and punch Lu Qingzhou in the face. Ji Union Wan lowered her head and frowned, secretly glancing at her eldest brother. If her eldest brother asked her to stay, she would definitely do it without hesitation. However, her eldest brother just sat on the sofa, looking at the two of them with a smile. A trace of bitterness rose in her heart. She broke free from Lu Qingzhou's shackles and walked out of the door with quick steps. She was afraid that she would have a mental breakdown if she stayed any longer. Wait for your good news, brother-in-law. Before leaving, Tang Lingfeng said this. Ji Union Wan thought he meant that she would be pregnant with Lu Qingzhou's child. Her heart sank instantly. Is it possible that Big Brother is planning to let her stay in the Lu family forever? Watching the two people leave, Tang Lingfeng's delicate and beautiful eyebrows became extremely sharp at some point, and his beautiful eyes like black washed stone were filled with creepy hatred. One day, he will take back his lost treasure. On the way home, Ji Union Wan was hesitant to speak. She wanted Lu Qingzhou to take her back to school, but she didn't dare. The car was speeding along the busy street. Lu Qingzhou's face was cold and kept away from strangers, and he didn't speak a word. Suddenly, he saw a familiar figure flash in front of him. The figure was wearing a sun hat and a slim black dress, and was crossing the street quickly. He narrowed his eyes and looked carefully for a few seconds. With a squeak, the car slid quickly across the ground and stopped. Before Ji Union Wan could react, Lu Qingzhou had already opened the car door and ran after the woman in the black dress. "Yi Feiyu!" Lu Qingzhou shouted through gritted teeth. The woman running in front stopped, a surprised smile appeared on her face. She turned around and ran towards Lu Qingzhou, threw herself into his arms, stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek. Lu Qingzhou's face instantly turned cold, and he wiped his face with his sleeve in disgust, and said in a sinister voice, "Yi Feiyu, you are so shameless. Why do I need face? It's enough for me to have you." Yi Feiyu said with a smile, staring at Lu Qingzhou with bubbling eyes. He was so handsome. Fortunately, she ran away from marriage, otherwise she would have missed this handsome man, Lu Qingzhou. Lu Qingzhou was too lazy to say anything more to this crazy woman. He dragged her to the car. He had to send this woman to his eldest brother to admit her mistake. Chapter 24. Two women getting along. Hey, who is this little beauty in the car? She's a schoolgirl. I can't tell that you like this type. Yi Feiyu was surprised when he saw Ji Nianhuan. This girl looked too young. Anyway, I don't like your type. Hurry up and get in the car to meet my brother. Lu Qingzhou dragged her into the car. I'm not going. Yi Feiyu's eyes were slightly angry and her voice became a few notches higher. While speaking, she was already struggling to open the car door. Ji Nianhuan kept pursing her lips and kept silent. She turned her head slightly to glance at Yi Feiyu and said lightly, "If you don't meet his elder brother, you will never meet him again." Yi Feiyu stretched out his legs and retracted them. He glared at Lu Qingzhou angrily, then turned his gaze to Ji Nianhuan. Little beauty. Who are you to him? She is my wife. I advise you to be polite. Lu Qingzhou said with his head tilted. Lu Qingzhou, when did you get married? I didn't even drink the wedding wine. Yi Feiyu was unhappy. Ji Nianhuan was speechless. They didn't even have a wedding banquet, okay? Thinking of this, she also felt a little disappointed. By the way, little beauty. What's your name? Yi Feiyu asked casually while lying on the chair. My name is Ji Nianhuan. You are. Ji Nianhuan looked at her a little embarrassed. To be precise, this woman was the fiancée of brother Lu Qingzhou, and the man she liked was her husband. She really didn't know how to describe her identity. I'm your husband's suitor. Yi Feiyu said without caring at all. Yi Feiyu. Lu Qingzhou was slightly angry and couldn't help but yell. Why are you so fierce? Who made you so charming? Charming? Why didn't she feel that? He was a grown man who had to rely on his brother for living expenses. He was idle all day long and thought about having a wedding night with her. Ji Nianhuan was just thinking about it. She didn't dare to say these words in front of Lu Qingzhou. During the rest of the trip, Yi Feiyu was the only one who kept complaining, saying that after she ran away from her marriage, her father put her in solitary confinement, and she had only escaped in the past 2 days. From her words, Ji Nianhuan was so shocked that her jaw almost dropped. She said that she had hundreds of bodyguards at home, and her house was built as magnificently as a palace, and she couldn't count the numbers in her bank account with 10 fingers. I'll take you to my house to play later. Yi Feiyu whispered in Ji Nianhuan's ear. Ji Nianhuan nodded with curiosity. When they arrived at the hospital, Yi Feiyu stood shyly in front of the ward door and refused to go in no matter how Lu Qingzhou threatened her. Lu Qingzhou even wanted to carry her on his shoulders and throw her in. You go in first, I want to talk to Feiyu. Ji Nianhuan pushed Lu Qingzhou in first, reassuring him with her eyes that she could handle it. Seeing Ji Nianhuan's determined eyes, Lu Qingzhou felt relieved about her. He didn't know where his confidence came from, but he felt that Ji Nianhuan would definitely be able to convince Yi Feiyu. Feiyu, why don't you want to go see your brother? Ji Nianhuan pulled Yi Feiyu aside and asked softly. After spending time together in the car just now, Ji Nianhuan felt that Yi Feiyu was actually a pretty good person. Although she liked Lu Qingzhou, she did not show any rejection when facing Ji Nianhuan, her wife. Instead, she kept talking to her with great interest and even wanted to take Ji Nianhuan home to see her. She had good intentions and might just have had a good impression of Lu Qingzhou for a while. I just don't want to face him, Yi Feiyu said hesitantly. She knew that she was too cruel to Lu Yuming. Yi Feiyu felt guilty towards Lu Yuming, but she felt an irreparable debt. When they were together, she said that she was willing to try to like him, and if she didn't meet someone she liked within a year, she would marry him. However, 3 days before the wedding, she saw Lu Qingzhou at Lu's house and fell in love with this unruly man. His unruly temperament deeply attracted her. Later, Ji Nianhuan concluded that Lu Qingzhou should not have come back 3 days earlier. If he showed up after getting married, the matter would have been a done deal. Yi Feiyu couldn't divorce Lu Yuming, right? At least look at him. He is willing to ruin his body for you. Even if you don't do it for his sake, go and see him for Lu Qingzhou's sake. Besides, Lu Qingzhou has already promised his mother that he would take you to see your elder brother. You can't let him go back on his word, right? Just think of it as doing what he wants you to do in order to gain Lu Qingzhou's favor. As Ji Nianhuan spoke, she noticed that Yifei's expression was slightly moved. Come on, let's go in together. Yifei took Ji Nianhuan's arm with a smile on his face. Wait. Ji Nianhuan stopped. What's wrong? Yifei looked at her in confusion. Tell your eldest brother later to take care of his health and stop ruining it. Only by taking good care of his body can he have a chance to be with you. This is too corny. I won't say it, I can't say it. Yifei looked embarrassed and blushed. If you don't tell me, if he does the same thing again next time, it will be Lu Qingzhou who will be scolded. Ji Nianhuan said seriously. Okay, I'll tell you. Yifei finally gave in. She was willing to give it all for Lu Qingzhou. As soon as the two entered the ward, a look of surprise immediately appeared on Lu Yuming's pale face. He wanted to get up, but was held down by Lu Qingzhou. Brother, you should just lie down. When he saw Yifei, Lu Qingzhou's face immediately turned gloomy. He stared at her with a threatening look, fearing that she would say something to provoke her eldest brother. Ji Nianhuan made a gesture, believe me. Yifei slowly walked to the bedside with a stiff expression. His lips moved several times. He tried hard to force a smile and said quickly with a desperate attitude, Lu Yuming, you have to take care of yourself as soon as possible. Don't do anything that will hurt your body. Only by taking care of yourself. He paused and looked at Ji Nianhuan in embarrassment. Brother, Feiyu means that you can only stay with her if you take good care of your health. Yifei nodded, turned her head to the side, and her ears turned slightly red. I understand. I'm sorry for making you worry. Lu Yuming scratched his hair and smiled at Yifei embarrassedly. Seeing this, Lu Qingzhou quietly pulled Ji Nianhuan out, pressed her against the wall at the door of the ward, supported his hands on her shoulders, lowered his head and deeply sniffed the faint fragrance on her body. Thank you. Lu Qingzhou was truly grateful to Ji Nianhuan from the bottom of his heart. If it weren't for her, Yifei might not have said those words to his elder brother. Ji Nianhuan's breathing was a little disordered. She was not used to such an ambiguous posture. You'd better go in. It's not good to leave Feiyu alone in there. As soon as Ji Nianhuan finished speaking, Yifei had already walked out of the ward. She looked up and saw the two people in this position. She covered her mouth and turned away. She really didn't mean it, so don't look at it. Cough cough cough. Ji Nianhuan coughed a few times awkwardly, and Lu Qingzhou finally let her go. Yifei snorted, ignoring Lu Qingzhou's hostile gaze, walked directly to Ji Nianhuan and pulled her, holding his head high and saying to Lu Qingzhou, I'll take your wife out to play. After that, he ignored him, took Ji Nianhuan's hand and walked away quickly. Looking at the two women whispering to each other in the hospital corridor, Lu Qingzhou's originally gloomy face finally showed a smile. It seems that his little wife gets along well with this sister-in-law. Ji Nianhuan didn't know why, although Yifei liked her husband, she just couldn't treat Yifei as a mistress. The first time she saw her, Ji Nianhuan secretly classified her as someone she could make friends with. Later, Ji Nianhuan realized that Yifei, the so-called mistress, was nothing compared to that mixed-race beauty. Yifei was a little white rabbit in wolf's clothing, and that woman was the wolf disguised as a little white rabbit. Chapter 25, First Collaboration with My Brother-in-Law. At night, in the south of the city, surrounded by gloomy ruins, there is a magnificent large casino hidden. People are coming and going, and there is a lot of noise. Various shouts can be heard one after another. Uniformed dealers are standing on the table and operating skillfully. This is the hidden casino within the Anher Group under the jurisdiction of Lin Chuan. Lu Qingzhou was sitting at the card table in the outer hall, his legs crossed leisurely, a half-smoked cigarette dangling from his thin lips. He was squinting at the cards, his handsome face shrouded in a bluish-white mist, revealing an indifferent and vague sense of frivolity and indifference. He deliberately chose the outer hall to attract attention, especially to make Lin Chuan notice him. An hour later, Lu Qingzhou's desk was already piled with colorful chips. All in. He glanced at the cards, leaned back in his chair casually, and said in a low voice. The crowd was noisy. The chips on his table must be several $1 million, in US dollars. This was a big deal. Most people were disdainful of his youthful and frivolous attitude. The remaining few people at the table looked at each other. One of them drew a straight flush. His face turned fierce and he pushed all the chips in front of him away. Since Brother Lu is so confident, I will accompany you to the end. Whatever you want. Lu Qingzhou said lightly, raised his head and smiled meaningfully at the camera. When the cards were opened, almost everyone in the casino gathered here, and hundreds of pairs of eyes stared at Lu Qingzhou's hand as he flipped the cards. When the cards were opened, it turned out to be 3 aces. Everyone gasped. Tang Huishun turned pale, stood up, and pointed at Lu Qingzhou tremblingly. In the monitoring room, all screens clearly displayed Lu Qingzhou's every move. Lin Chuan's face was shaking, he clenched his fists, his eyes were wide open, and he slammed his hands on the table, shaking the whole table. Is this bastard cheating? I don't believe he has such good luck. Of course Lu Qingzhou was not cheating. This method was child's play for him. He didn't even bother to cheat. What he was using was high technology. The man next to him didn't dare to say anything, and his face was filled with surprise and disbelief. You are a bunch of trash. I have kept you for nothing. Go and ask my 5th brother to come out and deal with this bastard. Lin Chuan cursed violently with a fierce look on his face. This so-called 5th brother is a master hired by the casino. He has a set of superb cheating techniques, which are designed to prevent the casino from having a situation where one person dominates the casino like Lu Qingzhou. Har har, it's not that easy to make money from the casino. When they saw the 5th brother appear, everyone understood what was going on, but no one dared to speak out. However, Lu Qingzhou did not show any fear. He made a gentlemanly gesture of invitation and waited for his 5th brother to take a seat. His obsidian eyes were slightly narrowed, and he looked proud that he had won. Playing with US dollars or euros. Add all the chips on the table, and this. A bunch of car keys, belonging to a Lamborghini Supra. Lu Qingzhou had a lazy and careless expression on his face, and didn't take 5th brother seriously at all. Everyone couldn't help but secretly worry for him, as he probably had never seen how powerful 5th brother was. The 5th brother is a lean middle-aged man with a pair of shrewd eyes that exude a sharp light. He is dressed in a clean and neat casual outfit. He doesn't look pretentious, but looks energetic. Let's play with US dollars, and include this in the count. When everyone looked, they saw that the thin piece of paper he threw on the table was actually the title deed of the casino. A meaningful smile appeared on Lu Qingzhou's lips. The highlight he had been looking forward to was here. After the dealer dealt the cards, Lu Qingzhou did not rush to look at the cards. Instead, his gaze moved slowly over 5th brother, his sharp eyes fixed on 5th brother's right hand. More and more people gathered, as if they were led by Lu Qingzhou, and everyone's eyes were always looking towards the 5th brother's right hand. Realizing that Lu Qingzhou had seen through his cheating methods, 5th brother's forehead broke out in sweat, his lips trembled, and his complexion became increasingly worse. Flip the cards, don't waste time. Lu Qingzhou said leisurely. The 5th brother's face turned pale instantly, and under the impatient urging of everyone, he finally collapsed in the chair. I won. Lu Qingzhou pushed all the chips in front of his 5th brother in front of himself. You? The 5th brother's words were still stuck in his throat when Lin Chuan could no longer bear it and pushed open the door of the monitoring room and came out. He looked ferocious and brought several muscular men with him. It was obvious that he came with bad intentions. Brothers, come on, beat this bastard half to death and throw him out. I want to see who dares to cheat in the casino again. The men swarmed forward and surrounded Lu Qingzhou. The latter was agile and suddenly jumped out of the chair and knocked down the closest man effortlessly. Seeing this, the other men rushed forward together. In the melee, Lu Qingzhou gradually lost the upper hand, bruises appeared on his forehead, and his body was stained with bright red blood. A few minutes later, he was lying on the table. Lin Chuan approached him with a sinister smile, holding a baseball bat in his hand. Just as he was about to attack, a heart-wrenching scream came from outside the door. Oh no! It seems the police are here. The crowd suddenly became chaotic, some fled and some hid, and soon only Lin Chuan and a few of his men were left. You bastard, you dare to call the police? Lin Chuan said, gritting his teeth. Lu Qingzhou smiled and shook the thing in his sleeve. It turned out to be a small camera. Everything that happened in the casino just now was transmitted without any reservation. I'm going to take you with me. Lin Chuan raised the baseball bat, but before he could bring it down, a pair of strong hands grabbed his wrist. It's Tangafeng. Just after 9 o'clock in the morning, Lu Qingzhou walked into the Tang family with brisk steps. Top grade Westlake Longjing tea. Big brother is really generous. Lu Qingzhou took a sip of the fragrant tea in his hand and praised. A hint of subtle surprise appeared on Tang Feng's elegant and indifferent face, as if he didn't expect Lu Qingzhou to taste tea. Brother-in-law, do you know tea? This question sounded a little doubtful, and Lu Qingzhou simply frowned without showing any displeasure. I know a little bit, but I seldom drink tea in America. Tang Feng had always thought that Lu Qingzhou was just a gangster, but all the signs showed that he was not as simple as Tang Feng thought. As far as I know, the designated candidate for the president of Anher Group is Lin Chuan, right? Lu Qingzhou said casually. Tang Feng was slightly startled, and clasped his hands together under the table, exerting ruthless force, but he still nodded humbly and said, the news from inside is indeed like this. Do you want to get rid of Lin Chuan? Lu Qingzhou didn't like beating around the bush and asked directly. The question was too straightforward. Tang Feng didn't know how to answer for a moment, but his expression told Lu Qingzhou that he really wanted to get rid of Lin Chuan, the thorn in his side. Not only did he always put pressure on Tang Feng, but he also flirted with Ji Nianhuan verbally from time to time. Tang Feng had long disliked him, but unfortunately his uncle was the chairman Meng Xiao, so Tang Feng didn't dare to act rashly against him. Brother-in-law, do you have any good ideas? I'm all ears. Tang Feng sat up straight and put on a serious expression. Chapter 26. Take your wife home for a night. Anher Group has been secretly operating an underground casino. You must know that, right? This casino is under the jurisdiction of Lin Chuan. Do you understand what I mean? Lu Qingzhou stopped talking and took a sip of tea. You mean, we should start from the casino? Tang Feng looked at him in embarrassment. Of course he knew about casinos. A lot of funds of Anher Group were laundered in casinos. However, if they were to touch this casino, it would inevitably set off a bloody storm. Of course, we need external help for this matter. As for this external force, police? Tang Feng asked a question, but his tone was affirmative. Yes. Lu Qingzhou nodded. If you need my help, please let me know, said Tang Feng, nodding slightly. The two discussed and reached a consensus that Lu Qingzhou would go to the casino to disrupt the situation first. With Lin Chuan's violent and impulsive personality, he would definitely attack him, and then Tang Feng would notify the police. Lin Chuan lost the casino, and even if he escaped from the police, Meng Xiao would definitely not let him go. At that time, it would be a question whether he could survive, not to mention competing with Tang Feng for the position of president of Anher Group. As expected, Lin Chuan couldn't hold back and attacked Lu Qingzhou. The situation in the casino was chaotic and the police arrived. Everything was going according to plan. Lin Chuan turned around to see who was holding his wrist, but Tang Feng had his hat brim pulled down and was wearing a mask. His entire face was in shadow and Lin Chuan couldn't see clearly. Before the police arrived, Tang Feng injected Lin Chuan with anesthetic. Lin Chuan fell to the ground soon. Tang Feng kicked him, but he had no reaction. Hurry up and leave. It will be difficult for us to escape when the police come. Meng Xiao will definitely investigate who leaked the news. Tang Feng urged in a low voice. Only then did he see that Lu Qingzhou had bruises all over his body. Lu Qingzhou patted his dusty clothes, snorted coldly, and walked out first. Brother-in-law, you've suffered. In the BMW, Tang Feng took out a few pieces of paper and handed them to Lu Qingzhou, whose body was covered in blood, with a somewhat disdainful tone. Lin Chuan's men are just cats and dogs, how could he be beaten like this by them? Gangsters are gangsters, their skills are just like this. Lu Qingzhou took the tissue and lazily wiped the blood off his face, with a look of unbridled arrogance on his lips. It's just paint. I won't be hurt by these rubbish. After a few seconds of pause, he added, it was my Huan's idea to use paint. Ji Nianhuan was wandering around with Yi Feiyu. She didn't know that she had helped Lu Qingzhou a lot by using paint to deceive people on her wedding night. Tang Feng looked stunned and didn't say anything else. The lights are on and the night is slightly cool. Yi Feiyu was taking Ji Nianhuan shopping in the commercial city. As an avid luxury goods lover, Yi Feiyu had already stuffed his hands with large and small bags of various newly launched big brands, and even Ji Nianhuan was carrying several bags in his hands. Ji Nianhuan finally had a deep understanding of the world of the rich. When Yi Feiyu went to the counter to pay, she stole a glance at the number. She didn't remember how many zeros were behind it. She didn't even dare to count. It was just a windbreaker. Looking at the pile of things in her hand, she felt so distressed. This prodigal sister-in-law, I guess only a successful man like Lu Yuming can support her. As for Lu Qingzhou, she didn't even dare to think about it. This comparison made Ji Nianhuan feel even more disgusted with the idle Lu Qingzhou. Fei Yu, let's go back. It's too late. Ji Nianhuan reminded in a low voice. Why, are you afraid that your Lu Qingzhou will worry? Yi Feiyu tilted his head and teased her. Of course not. Ji Nianhuan denied hastily, her anxious expression showing her inner panic even more. Oh, don't worry, I have already sent him a text message saying that you can come back to the Yi family with me tonight. Yi Feiyu patted his chest, very proud. Ji Nianhuan wanted to say something, but seeing Yi Feiyu's excited expression, she had to give up and resigned herself to her fate and accompanied her to get a manicure. It was almost 11 o'clock when the two of them got into Yi Feiyu's cool red Maserati. The car sped all their way to the outskirts of the city. Yi Feiyu turned into a small road with ease and arrived at the Yi family more than 10 minutes later. Ji Nianhuan, why are you standing there? Come in. Seeing Ji Nianhuan standing there in a daze, Yi Feiyu frowned in confusion. Looking at the Yi family mansion in front of him, Ji Nianhuan was simply stunned. The decoration style of the exterior wall was a simple white wall, but it was several meters high. No one knew where the exterior wall extended to, and it was the kind that seemed to have no end. The house inside could not be seen, but two lifelike dragons carved on the high roof could be vaguely seen, which looked rich and magnificent. Fei Yu, your family is so rich. Ji Nianhuan couldn't help but sigh. Nonsense, I'm a woman with countless deposits in my bank account. If you hang out with me in the future, I promise you'll have the best food and the best drinks. Yi Feiyu said arrogantly, walking in front in high heels. Ji Nianhuan felt warm in her heart and hurried to catch up with her. The decoration style of the house is unique, combining both European and Chinese styles. It is luxurious but not vulgar, classical yet flamboyant, elegant yet luxurious, and has an indescribable high-end feeling. In Yi Feiyu's words, this house was designed by several famous designers and its value is immeasurable. Yi Feiyu took Ji Nianhuan through many twists and turns and finally arrived at her room. The decoration of the room was very simple, which did not quite match Yi Feiyu's flamboyant personality. This was decorated for me by my father. It has an old-fashioned interior. I don't live at home often, so I was too lazy to ask someone to make changes. Yi Feiyu explained. By the time Yi Feiyu finally finished taking care of a series of troublesome things like bathing and skin care, Ji Nianhuan was so tired that she collapsed on the bed and fell asleep. Hey, Ji Nianhuan, are you asleep? Yi Feiyu kicked her gently. Ji Nianhuan's eyelashes trembled, but she did not wake up. Oh, I envy you so much. I wanted to marry Lu Qingzhou so much, but he married you. Do you think you two will get divorced? Ji Nianhuan moved, as if he heard it, but also as if he didn't hear it, and hummed softly. Yi Feiyu was still chattering about Lu Qingzhou's good points and her fantasies about the future. When she didn't get a response from Ji Nianhuan, she sighed, pulled the quilt over her, and fell into a deep sleep. After the excitement in the casino that night, Lu Qingzhou was exhausted both physically and mentally. When he thought of his gentle and lovely wife at home, he couldn't help but smile. Ding-dong sound, it's the text message alert tone. Lu Qingzhou opened his phone and saw that it was from Yi Feiyu. He was too lazy to respond to her text messages. In the past, Lu Qingzhou always treated her text messages as spam, which were all cheesy love words that made your teeth fall out. But then he thought that Yi Feiyu seemed to have gone out with Ji Nianhuan this afternoon. Thinking of this, he unlocked the phone and clicked on the text message page. Handsome guy, I'll take your wife back to the Yi family to stay for one night. Chapter 27 You Can Only Divorce. Lu Qingzhou's face darkened instantly. Not only did he take her out to play for an afternoon, but he also wanted to occupy his wife at night. However, when he thought of his elder brother, he reluctantly replied okay. In fact, he was very resistant in his heart. He even wanted to drive his wife home directly. Seeing his elder brother being tortured to death by love, Lu Qingzhou felt helpless and distressed. He couldn't understand how a woman could have such a great influence on his elder brother. He felt that he would never be tied down by a woman in his life, but the fact was that he soon tasted this kind of influence, which was even more fierce than that of his own elder brother. The Americans had urged him several times to go back quickly, but he just couldn't let go of his elder brother. He didn't want to admit that one of the reasons he stayed in the country was because of his little wife. Surrounded by bluish-white smoke, his outline became increasingly blurred, with an air of distance that made him seem untouchable. Early in the morning, Jiyu Nianhuan woke up in a rather unfamiliar environment. She looked around and saw Yifeiyu had already gotten up. She was sitting on the sofa in front of the window with a lady's cigarette in her hand. The smoke was so thick that Jiyu Nianhuan couldn't see clearly. "Jiyu Nianhuan, do you want to hear my story?" Yifeiyu put out the cigarette in his hand, looking slightly sad. Jiyu Nianhuan had already sat up and nodded. In fact, she also wanted to know what had happened between her and the two brothers of the Lu family. "Since I was a young girl, I have met all kinds of men. I have been looking for my true love. Unfortunately, those men were either attracted by my family background or coveted my body. They all had no real feelings for me. Then, I met Lu Yuming." Yifeiyu seemed to have thought of something worth remembering, with a faint smile on her face. "And then?" Jiyu Nianhuan asked. "Don't be impatient, let me talk slowly." Yifeiyu calmed down, his emotions stabilized a little, and he continued, "Lu Yuming is one of those many suitors. He has a good family background, looks good, and has a good temper. We have been together for about a year, and I feel that we are a good match in all aspects. Well, we are a good match, but I am not attracted to him. I thought Lu Yuming was the one destined for me. He accompanied me to do everything I wanted to do, and I should love him. However, he gave me the feeling that he was too dull and could not say anything. What I wanted was romance and uniqueness. Indeed, Lu Yuming saw that he was an honest man. We were getting ready to get married, and I should have been content if things went their way. But guess what happened?" Jiyu Nianhuan knew some of what happened later, but she wasn't very clear. "Later, you met Lu Qingzhou." "Yes. 3 days before their wedding, at Lu's house, I met Lu Qingzhou, the man who had just returned from the United States. He was so attractive. Just standing there, his whole body was shining with dazzling light. It was an indescribable feeling, like a throbbing heart, boiling blood, and a surge of adrenaline. Only when I saw him did I realize that he was my true love. I had been deceiving myself before." Yifeiyu's eyes turned slightly red and he sniffed. Jiyu Nianhuan. She was speechless. When she saw Lu Qingzhou for the first time, she did feel that he had a unique temperament and pride, but he was not as charming as she described. "You probably know what happened later. I broke off the engagement for him, abandoned Lu Yuming, and was sent abroad for solitary confinement by my father. So how is the story? Is it exciting and tortuous?" Yifeiyu smiled and wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes. It seemed that she did feel very guilty in her heart, but she also had a passionate love for Lu Qingzhou. Jiyu Nianhuan looked at Yifeiyu quietly, not knowing what to say for a moment. "Jiyu Nianhuan, I will never give up on Lu Qingzhou. I will never give up on him in this life. No matter whether you are married now or not, I will not give up on him. The only outcome for you can be divorce." Yifeiyu said word by word with great force. Divorce. She wanted it, but she was afraid that the man would not agree. At that moment, Jiyu Nianhuan felt mixed emotions, both selfish and kind. Lu Yuming's love for Yifeiyu has made her believe in her heart that no matter what happens in the future, Yifeiyu will always be her sister-in-law. She married Lu Qingzhou, a stranger, for her elder brother Tangafeng, just to obey her elder brother's orders, and she couldn't refuse. Because she had lived in the Tang family for more than 20 years, she was very grateful for Tangafeng's meticulous care. No matter what her elder brother asked, she would do it. But as a girl full of fantasies, she also had beautiful yearnings and pursuits for love in her heart. Seeing Lu Yuming's sincere feelings for Yifeiyu, how could she not be moved? Her heart always leans towards Lu Yuming. She wants to win Yifeiyu for him. She really doesn't want to see her elder brother torment himself for Yifeiyu. "Feiyu, you should stay together with brother Lu Qingzhou." Jiyu Nianhuan was silent for a long time and said this very calmly. "Heh." Yifeiyu sneered, "Jiyu Nianhuan, stop wasting your breath. I said, I will never give up Lu Qingzhou." After a slight pause, Yifeiyu lit another cigarette. Her rapid puffs made her choke. "My father has kept me under house arrest abroad for half a year. During this period, I have tried every possible way to commit suicide. What's the meaning of life if I can't be with the person I love? In the end, my father compromised. He kicked me out of the house and gave me my freedom back. Ji Nianhuan looked at Yi Feiyu's self-destructive expression calmly and smiled slightly. If you don't want to give up Lu Qingzhou, you should go to the hospital to see Lu Yuming more often and let Lu Qingzhou know that you care about his family. And you should know the position of Lu Yuming in Lu Qingzhou's heart. Har! You are confusing the public. Yi Feiyu sneered with great disdain. They are brothers. You hurt Lu Yuming. Lu Qingzhou will definitely be dissatisfied with you. How could he treat you well? It is even more impossible for him to be with you. Otherwise, many people will gossip about him. Ji Nianhuan said righteously. Gossip? I don't think he is the kind of man who cares about gossip. He is the kind of man who is generous, unruly, and doesn't take anyone seriously. Yi Feiyu couldn't help but imagine all the beautiful descriptions of Lu Qingzhou. Ji Nianhuan rolled her eyes speechlessly. It turned out that what others said was right. A woman who is blinded by love has an IQ of 0. If anything happens to Lu Yuming, there will never be a possibility between you and Lu Qingzhou. Ji Nianhuan said in a gentle voice. Yi Feiyu was really stunned. He looked at Ji Nianhuan in confusion and surprise. What do you mean by this? Ji Nianhuan talked to Yi Feiyu for a long time, telling him everything about Lu Qingzhou's concern for Lu Yuming and their brotherhood. What are we waiting for? Let's go to the hospital to see Lu Yuming. More than an hour later, Yi Feiyu's urgent voice of sudden realization came. On their way to the hospital, Yi Feiyu would glance at Ji Nianhuan from time to time, a kind and sensible little girl. Thinking of how she had accompanied him shopping and chatted with him yesterday, Yi Feiyu couldn't help but feel guilty. She actually wanted to snatch a husband from such a beautiful girl. She tried hard to suppress her restless emotions. Ji Nianhuan, you are very kind. After holding it in for a long time, Yi Feiyu finally uttered these words. Ji Nianhuan smiled slightly, blinked her long eyelashes, and pouted playfully. You are also very kind. In fact, Ji Nianhuan's behavior cannot be simply described as kindness. For Lu Yuming, it can indeed be said to be a good deed, but as for Lu Qingzhou... What? Ji Nianhuan, what did you say about me? You actually said I'm kind. Little beauty, I'm going to steal your man now, and you actually say I'm kind. Yi Feiyu asked in confusion. Ji Nianhuan just smiled calmly. It must be said that Yi Feiyu showed up at the right time and helped her a lot. Yi Feiyu didn't know that he had been tricked by Ji Nianhuan, and he still thought in his heart how cute this girl was, so silly. As if remembering something, Ji Nianhuan took out her cell phone and thought it would be more reliable to call Lu Qingzhou first. What if Lu's mother and father were in the hospital? It would be so embarrassing. But Ji Nianhuan, who was holding the phone, paused for a moment, then turned his head and asked, Feiyu, do you have Lu Qingzhou's phone number? Yi Feiyu looked at Ji Nianhuan in astonishment. Come on, Lu Qingzhou is your husband, and you actually asked me for his cell phone number. Are you really his wife? Ji Nianhuan pursed her lips, feeling that her behavior was indeed incomprehensible to outsiders. But she really didn't have Lu Qingzhou's cell phone number. Ji Nianhuan, I think you are so stupid. You are so silly that you might not even know that you were sold out by Lu Qingzhou that day, and you were still foolishly counting money for him. Yi Feiyu reminded kindly, looking heartbroken.